Chapter 261, Silver Coin Squad. Silver Coin Squad. Report. The gathering here of my new expedition squad was our final preparation before leaving. Knight number 1, present. Knight number 1 was a grey elf flaw knight, who wasn't wearing heavy and solid metallic armor. Instead, the elf was clad in leather armor made from a semi-god ranked hydra's skin. This was far more precious and of more excellent quality than any metallic armor, especially since this semi-god level hydra's skin was something rare and definitely couldn't be purchased anywhere. This lighter armor made an excellent pair with any elven warrior. It wouldn't restrict an elf's natural dexterity, and its defensive ability against all sorts of slicing and piercing was even stronger than the hardest metal armor. Its excellent magic resistance properties also far surpassed the element of mercury that was nicknamed as the king of all magical metals. However, I had to be sparing in its usage. If it weren't for the fact that semi-god hydra skin was too difficult to obtain, I would have loved to give such equipment to all of my elite warriors. But, leader, can I wipe off the black dust? Such excellent equipment looks like a second-hand equipment that costs only 15 silver coins. It was so difficult for me to take it from Momo. Yep, the grey elf before me wasn't that Momo, who lacked any moral integrity. For the sake of my chastity, cough, cough, for the sake of my authority as the squad leader, I ignored that mad dog, who had strongly requested to go along with me. I had also ignored her comment about how Momo only wore this for a few days. Don't steal Momo's treasure. Ah, stinky sister Yawn, don't put it on. Your thick legs and all the fat on your chest will break her. I chose Captain Yuan, who had just finished the moonlight ritual. And this wasn't only due to my bias. Since both Yuan and Momo were law knights, Yuan, who was at the peak of gold rank, was not only more reliable in power level, but her tremendous dragon-slaying sword, which she was able to use so easily, was definitely a top-level weapon at least of the legend or epic rank. When her armor's defense, magic resistance, and natural magic resistance were all taken into account, she had high DPS as well as high tanking ability. Her only weakness was her somewhat slow speed. Her mind, which had once been swaddled in thoughts about the holy light, was both trustworthy and honest. If necessary, she would be my perfect cannon fodder to cover my escape. Cough, I meant meat shield. Since everybody trusts me and the two highnesses gave the important task of managing town security to me, as the captain of town security, how can I possibly let myself be limited by the sunlight? Most importantly, forget about being captain, but how can I let myself lose to Momo? I will accept the moonlight ritual to become a grey elf that doesn't fear the sunlight. Yawn gritted her teeth and accepted the moonlight ritual, becoming the representative of a batch of new grey elves within town security. The celebratory fact was that after Lorsai's death, the moonlight ritual no longer had so many religious elements to it, greatly decreasing in both risk and pain. After this news spread, many normal dark elves also underwent the moonlight ritual in order to live life on the surface without fear of sunlight. It seems that the moonlight goddess has a good temper. She didn't even mind the fact that she got so many false believers. This ritual even takes up a significant amount of her divine power. Does she intend to fight for the divine obligation of salvation? That would mean she's declaring war against one of the God of Holy Light's follower gods. All that stuff aside, Momo's greatest advantage was gone after Yawn became a grey elf as well. Yep, I definitely didn't choose someone so honest and easy to bully like Yawn because Momo was too difficult to deal with. As for the side effects of taking the town security head captain with me, the weather sure was nice today, wasn't it? Number 2, Cohen, Knight, Magical Warrior. I glanced over at him, causing this pitiful acolyte to immediately turn away. Perhaps, in front of us, he was still nothing more than someone to vent on, but this young knight was already a major and popular personage in Defender. His seemingly divine talent in magic helped him gain fame, and as my knight retainer and a good friend of the great engineer Timmy Lade, this young knight, who came from a farmer's family, had entered the higher-ups of the city. He did not win others' trust with his status but with his honesty and friendliness. Perhaps the only incomprehensible part was that even though he mysteriously managed to enter the silver rank as a mage, he still hadn't progressed any bit whatsoever as a knight. Not to mention that he always emphasized his status as a retainer knight, but it would only take the mention of one thing before everyone understood. Oh, he's His Highness Roland's disciple? No wonder. What the hell? Is there no normal person around me? When I first heard about how everyone thought, I had become incredibly angry and immediately tried to counter it. But the more I tried countering, the tinier my voice got. After all, I tried recalling the best I could, and with all the names I remembered, such as Adam, Amelia, Ren, Gleena, and so on, it really didn't seem like there was a single person who could be termed as normal. I lost my confidence. HMPH. It's definitely not my fault. It's the fault of that King of all Gentlemen title. I think that it's simply that birds of a feather flock together. Did you meet many normal people even before you had this title? I didn't even know how I should respond to my system's retort. It had hit me in such a weak spot. It really seemed like that was the case, as Cohen and Yaen were the few relatively normal individuals out of everyone I knew. Although a dark elf that loved the light and a magical genius who was obsessed about becoming a knight were slightly strange, they were still mostly normal. By now, all of you probably understand my standards for choosing my companions for this expedition. That's right, normal people. I had enough of gentlemen as well as incurable Cenobius. This time, I did my best to pick as many normal people as possible to accompany me and average out the Beifanginess of this team. If you want to reduce the Beifanginess of your team, kick yourself out of it. That's a better solution than anything. Shut up. If you keep treating me like this, do you believe that I can level you up to the God of all gentlemen, and multiply your ability to attract gentlemen by 10 times? Cough, cough. The weather sure was nice today. Let us return to the main topic at hand. With Harlois teaching him, Cohen's studies in magic progressed at an astonishing pace. He already had his own unique understanding of being a four-elemental sword caster and had developed numerous unique sword seals and magic sword techniques of his own, well surpassing what he was taught. Even though he was clearly still in novice silver rank, he already had magic sword techniques surpassing the gold rank or higher. As for melee sword techniques and combat prowess, after being taught by several dedicated sword saint level instructors, he had probably progressed from someone who would be sliced half to death while being chased by a skeleton soldier to someone who would chase a skeleton soldier and fatigue himself to death. Well, fine then. There was at least some progress. But since skeleton soldiers were basically at the same level as a farmer, his progress in this area was practically ignorable. You bastard! I've never seen a swordsman as idiotic as you. With so many sword saints teaching you, even a gnome would have evolved into a gnome sword master. You can't even remember the basic correct holding grip for a sword. As expected of Roland's disciple. There's such a nice path for you already, but you don't want to take it, intentionally making things difficult for yourself. Alright then. If you ignored the last part there, Adam's angry scolding was quite reasonable. Still, I was able to understand what young Cohen desired. Back in the day, I had understood everything about sword techniques instantly, yet always found myself wanting to fall asleep when reading textbooks about magic, and I was still unsatisfied with being a melee combat class. Back in the day, when I was unwilling to become a melee combat class, it was mainly because I felt that all melee classes were cannon fodder, while mages were cool and powerful. As for why Cohen is so resolute about becoming a knight, it's probably because a knight, to him, represents protection and honor. Although I could understand, a normal human's growth period in the gold rank typically only lasted for a few years. With Cohen's outstanding talent in magic, it would be a pity if he wasted it. Coming out this time is probably a good chance to gain some practical combat experience that'll be good for him. If you're still incapable of becoming a swordsman through this, then obediently be a mage. What's perfect is that we're probably going to visit the mage country on this trip as well. I can give you a recommendation to the Cloud Tower for you to immediately go and cultivate there. As I looked at the young Cohen who had a sad face, I felt like I was looking at a past version of myself. I patted him on the head and then flicked him forcefully as a way of encouraging him. I then focused my attention on the next teammate of mine, who had joined me of their own volition and was someone who I was unable to refuse. In that case, I'm number 3. As for my job class, Dragon Queen? Oh, how about a ranger? My swordsmanship is alright. The black-haired beautiful woman was wearing exquisite silver chainmail along with a mercury rapier that was far more decorative than practical. She was just going along because she could conveniently deal with Molly's request for help, and as for her Dragon City, the weather sure is nice today. Yep, although today was filled with dark clouds, thunder and hail, the weather sure was nice. It seemed that dragons had an excellent understanding of the weather as well. She had an identical opinion as mine from earlier. You haven't even been Dragon Queen for all that long yet. Aren't you afraid that your bastard subordinates will rebel if you leave? In the underground world, we're the largest faction already. If they rebel, who would they join? Wouldn't they be afraid of our revenge? Besides, as long as they have the ability and courage to rebel, who cares? It's so boring being Dragon Queen. I can't do this, I can't do that, and I have to stay at the Dragon City. It's even more boring than being in Sulphur Mountain City back in the day. It's basically like being in jail. Who would want to do that? Now that I'm outside, I'm going to drink, play as much as I want. Should I say that this was as expected of Little Red? This status of being the Dragon Queen that Molly viewed as her own lifeblood was nothing more than chains binding Little Red down. Now that she had escaped after seizing the chance, Dragon City was probably in chaos. But it was a good thing for me if she came along. After all, we weren't exactly going out on an adventure, and it was important to have a trump card that could turn the situation around at a critical time. Originally, I had wanted Adam or Margaret to come along, but those two obviously knew that I was looking for people to do some work, so right as I was preparing for this expedition they had vanished, nowhere to be found. HMPH, it's fine if they don't come as well. Otherwise, I'd only see flashes of light every day. Number 4. Who's number 4? Oh. Your Highness, why do you suddenly sound so dejected? Did I do something impolite? The person before me who was acting so honest and surprised was the legend-ranked Archdruid Eaglestorm. I could only helplessly take him along. It was fine for an adventuring party to lack mages or warriors, but it would be nothing more than suicidal to be without a single healer. After all, nobody could be certain that they would never be injured, poisoned, cursed, or ambushed. Yet because of our current relationship with the Holy Church, it would be quite difficult to find a high-level holy priest to heal us. Although the Church of Law's job classes were capable fighters, they did lack healing capabilities. All the Holy Lie job classes among the town security were dark elves, so it wasn't convenient for them to come along. And, so, I could only helplessly choose the only backup option, the representative of the generalist school, the Druids, who were capable of attacking, defending, healing, and casting magic but mediocre at all. Number 5, Crows. Your Highness, I shall work my hardest. The Judgmenter and the Windstorm Druid Crows came along as well. Wasn't there a certain saying? Druids, Holy Knights, and Shamans all counted as only half a priest each. Since Eaglestorm by himself would obviously be unreliable, I might as well take a few extra people with me. Yep, I took 2 with me since druids can only count as half a priest each. They're both legends, even if one is a transformation specialist and the other is a windstorm specialist. They should at least count as 1 priest if I add them together, I hope. But the moment I saw how Crows was holding onto 2 books titled Introduction to Emergency Treatment, teaching you how to tie bandages in 3 minutes, as well as a guide to herbal medicine that even a monkey can learn, along with the fact that Eaglestorm had various healing books attached to his waist, all beginning level, my eyes began twitching. It would appear that I had been expecting too much out of them. There's no helping it. If it comes to it, I'll do the healing personally. Yep, since I'm a melee specialist Holy Knight, that makes it 3 healers, we should at least count for 1.5 priests. A ridiculously high-level Draconic Ranger, a genius magical swordsman who basically had almost gold rank combat strength, and a Law Knight who could kill and defeat any legend rank with her racial talent and equipment alone. This was such reliable frontline strength. But, the moment we got to our rear, things instantly seemed much more unreliable. Yawn and Cohen nervously glanced at these extravagant legend ranked healers. In the end, they decided against saying druids are only half a priest when they're specialists in life magic, and unhesitatingly decided to remain uninjured as much as possible. As for Little Red, She yawned and immediately began napping. Human's normal level of healing wasn't going to be of much use to her to begin with. Any cardinal level holy light priest would probably run out of mana while attempting to heal her at an extent that wouldn't even reach her natural recovery rate while sleeping. Me, there's also me. I'm a saint ranked beast tamer. I'm number 6, aren't I? Yep, what a lucky number. I'm so fortunate. That bastard didn't pay any attention to the fact that I was doing my best to ignore him. He even did his best to make his presence known. If I had any other choices, I wouldn't have chosen him. But the problem was that for an expeditionary squad like ours, the abilities of a veteran beast tamer were far too useful. Scouting in the wild, tracking, prematurely sensing danger, checking for traps, and so on. With a veteran hunter like him on our team, we would be able to make much easier progress outside in foreign environments. After all, our ranger was a non-specialist in ranger techniques who only relied on overwhelming base stats, a certain dragon, HMPH, so, it was practically an absolute requirement for Bai Feng to be brought along. Especially because of his beast tamer class's ability to control and detect beasts, which would be a huge help to my goal. You're forbidden from giving me any trouble, and you're banned from spreading your mysterious teachings about true love and mental pollution everywhere. You're also barred from doing anything disgusting in front of me. Bai Feng kept nodding, but I gave up when I was only halfway through. No matter how good his promises sounded, he would instantly forget them the moment he met some new true love. I'll be number 7, then. Yep, I'm the Holy Knight. I'm Mint Ice and Snow Archmage. I proudly rubbed my snow-white long archmage robes. It wasn't easy for me to have such a chance to show off, after all. For so long, I had been a melee combat class, but now I finally got to be in the rear. It wasn't easy, being a holy knight for so many years. I can finally change my identity. HMPH. From today onwards, please call me Archmage Rodri Vincent. What did I write on my fake ID again? Forget it, it's too hard to remember if the name is too long. Just call me Rolo. I made some fancy movements with my staff and pretended as if I was a physically weak mage who required his staff in order to walk. However, I accidentally used too much force with my staff, causing a large piece of the ground to crack and rock shards to fly everywhere. It looks like using top-notch metal to make a mage staff isn't such a good idea, though I think this will make for an excellent weapon. Yep, whenever some stupid muscleheads rush too close to me, all I have to do is smack them with this. Just imagining it feels great. Should I start my comments with a mage who can't even remember his own name he gave himself? With your intelligence, you might as well just go be a warrior. Or should I be commenting on your mage staff that even an ogre wouldn't have enough strength to pick up? Are you simply intending on winning your battles by beating the enemy warriors to death with your mage staff? Or, should I begin by commenting on your little squad's name? Just who is your language teacher? The silly cat's retorts were getting sharper and sharper. It seemed that she had been getting much practice recently. You're already commenting. Besides, what's wrong with naming us the Silver Coin Squad? What about the squad's full name? The Silver Coin and Handsome Man's Mystical Adventuring Squad. It sounds pretty good to me. Back in the day, your adventuring team was called Gold and Beautiful Women Adventuring Squad, which I won't comment on anymore. After all, you were the team leader, and you said the more mundane a team name was, the easier it would be for people to remember. Don't all adventurers seek romance and money? This name will move so many people. There were also quite a few females in our team, and we were all happy to be praised as beautiful women, so we were fooled by you due to our lack of experience. But do you know just what happened when we told others about our team name? They laughed so hard that they even dropped their weapons they were holding onto. That was the biggest humiliation of my life. Since even Little Red was complaining so much, it would appear that she had quite a lot of grievances. After a while, apart from you, who else would call our adventuring team by its real name? In the end, all of our personal reputations far exceeded that of our team's reputation. Just a while ago, an idiot even asked me about the name of our adventuring team in the past, wanting to learn information about our adventures before I sent that idiot flying with a single slap. Everyone else thought that I had a bad temper, but the real reason is your ridiculous naming sense. Is such a name something I can say out loud? I still want my reputation to remain intact. Little Red continued with her complaints, while a certain silly cat laughed continuously as she listened and even worked hard at adding fuel to the fire. But now take a look at the team names. From Gold and Beautiful Women, all you did was turn gold into silver and change beautiful women into handsome man. Your naming ability probably reaches a heavenly scale. I fell silent, but that silly cat still didn't know what was good for her as she continued making me angry. Handsome Man Squad? As expected of a name from you. Could it be that you want to be called the Handsome Squad leader? Ha ha ha, your Princess Peach form must have given you a lot of pressure. Do you want to be called handsome that badly? I was so angry that my veins were bulging as I grit my teeth and commanded that silly cat with our magical pet contract. Now I know what our team is lacking. It would seem that we're missing a cannon fodder thief class whose profession is to step on all the traps for us in order to disarm them. Yep, the best choice for a thief is a cat person class. Number 8, Harl Ois, come. As the squad leader, I've even prepared a thief outfit for you. Why don't you put it on? Wait a moment. Did you just say cannon fodder? Also, what are these? Cat ears and a cat tail? Just where is the tail supposed to be inserted? And there's actually such a pink armor? Ah, you pervert. Why do you have such things with you? They were leftovers from our spies' investigation into the Beastmen tribes. Harl Ois, don't even think about changing the topic or escaping. Obediently put this on for me. Could it be that you were using them? You're such a huge pervert. Don't even think about it. Chapter 262, Famous Detective Erland. There's only one truth. 1. You're the one who murdered Jack. Rosie, his newlywed wife. I shouted as I pointed at the short woman who was currently sobbing in Andy's arms. All the other villagers in the room had expressions filled with shock and disbelief. In their minds, these newlyweds had just gotten married and were really close, with an excellent relationship. Jack had been suddenly murdered, and Rosie had been the saddest. She had already fainted several times from crying too much. How could she possibly be the one to have done such a thing? The evidence is in how Jack died. The knife wounds on his neck aren't what really killed him, nor are the bruising handprints on his neck responsible. The pale color of his face is the critical factor. He was poisoned to death. Those handprints and bruises on his neck were simply caused by himself and his instinctive desire to try and breathe. The wide open window and missing valuable necklace are just red herrings meant to disguise this case as the work of a thief. As for evidence, the evidence is this half a bottle of poison that I discovered in your backyard. Rosie, do you dare to show me all the kitchen utensils in your home? There are definitely still some traces of poison left on them. Don't tell me you broke all the dishes. Obviously, my logical reasoning for this deduction wasn't exactly airtight, but Rosie wasn't exactly a well-educated lady from a rich family. She was only a village girl who had never seen the world before. When I suddenly roared at her and shook a bottle of medicine, not poison, before her eyes, she instantly panicked and revealed everything. I didn't do it on purpose. I was just trying to scare him. It's his fault for taking my dowry and gambling it all away. We have no more money left at all for even food. Wah! Who knew that rat poison would be strong enough to kill him? Alright then. This Jack fellow's reason for death was now clear. He had actually been poisoned to death by a common killer, rat poison. And even if he lost my entire dowry through gambling, that would have been fine, but he even cheated on me, and he had an affair with Carr from the neighboring jewelry store. Ha ha ha. Jack actually cheated on me with Carr for 3 years, and married me only to conceal his preferences. That's why I made Jack unable to see him for forevermore. Alright, it turned out that Carr was the name of another man. It would seem that this Jack fellow had rather unique preferences. I watched Rosie, who had been laughing and crying, finish with laughter out of extreme anger while gritting her teeth. Her smile was obviously an expression of one who had given up after cracking from too much mental pressure. While I sighed at how much information I just received, I had other things to exclaim about as well. It would seem that to this Jack fellow, the same gender is true love, while love between the opposite sexes is only an instinct. How are you supposed to have true love if the genders are different? See? The evidence is that this guy died within not even 3 months of having gotten married. But, doing this much was enough since we were only outsiders here. The rest should be handled by the locals. However, Since I was able to complete the quest to find the killer in such a short time, I was quite proud of my own effectiveness. Being able to marvelously solve the mystery in just 2 hours? From today onwards, please call me the famous Detective Rolo. You need to say all that? Everyone knew that she was the murderer. You were the only one wasting time, looking for evidence everywhere and having so much fun. Alright then, on a nearby wooden table, there was a small cat thief who had a dissatisfied expression as she repeatedly touched the fake cat ears attached to her head. That tan cat tail attached to her was also listlessly limp. It would seem that Harl Ois, who had newly entered the thief job class, was quite displeased with her new identity and equipment. I wasn't wasting time at all. I watched several hundred episodes of Detective Conan and Kindaichi case files, too, before, and I understand more than 2,000 ways to kill people and the motives for doing so. How could people like you see through such mysteries so easily? HMPH. Fools. You seem to have forgotten that I was the one who taught you undead magic, and the deceased's grudge was all around that woman. Without even needing to use soul summoning magic, anyone can discover that the remnant of his soul was still in the room, continuously screaming. It was so easy to deduce. Remember to do an exorcism later, otherwise, he might turn into a grudge-bearing ghost. She could do all that? I was so astonished that I opened my mouth wide agape, as I had forgotten entirely about such spells. It would seem like it wasn't so easy to be a detective in a magical world. After all, any undead mage would definitely become an amazing detective, and there would be much competition. However, the others were attacking my confidence as a famous detective as well. There was the scent of poison coming from the deceased's mouth, and the same scent was on that woman's hands. The scent was quite fresh, it was probably only 2 hours old. The wryly smiling archdruid rubbed his nose, but I could detect his pride in himself underneath that seemingly casual expression of his. As a transformation magic specialist druid, anything like a bear's strength, a cougar's speed, or a dog's nose was child's play to him. What he played with was instead a semi-dragon's strength, a griffin's speed, and a phantom wolf's sense of smell. It would be a simple matter for him to whiff such a low-level poison in just 1 minute. And when I looked towards Crows, who seemed so eager, I turned around again without saying a single word. Of course, I knew that since she was a judging specialist judgmenter as well as a high-ranked priest of law, criminals would be unable to hide from her. She probably wouldn't even need to use any divine arts to detect lies, just a simple judging spell would take care of everything. Your Highness, Little Feather told me that he saw the entire process of that woman poisoning her husband. He and his wives severely condoned such vicious behavior. I should mention that Little Feather was a sparrow that Bai Feng had met here. Were even sparrows able to have harems in this day and age? There must be something really deceiving about Bai Feng's honest-seeming smile. But, from my understanding, probably only Ya and Cohen in my little silver coin squad didn't realize the truth of the incident. After all, they were low intelligence useless cannon fodder. I meant melee combat classes. You think that anyone would be able to lie in front of a true dragon? Little Red spread salt on my wounds ever so casually. Your Highness, our normal training involves doing simple investigative work like this as well. We Dark Elves have a high amount of knowledge regarding poisons. It was quite clear the moment I saw that corpse. Yawn seemed to find her words quite awkward as she saw how I was obviously becoming depressed, but she was too honest to know how to use white lies to make me feel better. My little disciple Cohen didn't say anything. Instead, he was continuously nodding in agreement with my deduction. But as a poor farmer's boy who was an abnormal knight possessing an intelligence value over twice that of his strength, he had instantly discovered the remaining half a bottle of poison the moment he had walked in the door and found all the clues. But, he wanted to give his teacher face. Yet, for me, his ridiculously overboard expression of agreement as well as way too much nodding was the worst method of spreading salt on my wound of all. It made me even more embarrassed. Magic is so annoying. Only the wicked would flip to the end of a detective novel to find who the culprit is. Famous detectives never need to rely on magic. We only need acute observational ability and imagination. Can't you just use various little pieces of evidence and clues to conduct logical deductions that slowly force the culprit into a corner? Everyone had confused expressions that seemed to say, there's already magic that does all that, So why go to all the trouble? This made me even more embarrassed, as it turned out that all of my deductions had been unnecessary to begin with. And, so, my desire to cry turned into reality. I hate this world that's completely unscientific. How are famous detectives supposed to live here? You wicked people who go online to look for the culprit when playing detective games. Old Bob, who was the mayor of this little town, was finally able to rest assured as he watched the villagers taking Rosie away. No matter how chaotic things had been, this incredibly rare act of murder in Buja town had now been solved, which was a good thing. As for the mage leader of this little squad who was currently drawing circles on the wall, Bob knew that people in the mage job class were a little peculiar. He decided to write this off as some sort of strange method of celebration, and he wisely pretended to not see anything. Amitabha. This humble monk is journeying to the west in order to request Buddhist scriptures. These are my 3 disciples and my steed. This dragon here is a black dragon horse who just learned how to walk and is in a rebellious phase, not wanting anyone to ride her. The dark elf here is my 3rd disciple, the sand monk, while the hook-nosed beefy man is my pig transforming Jubaiji. My 1st disciple is Harl Ois. Do you know how to transform into a monkey? Hey, you actually bit me. 3. Simply judging by his self-introduction, Mayor Bob felt that this venerated mage must have had his brain struck by meteors in the past. Bob didn't understand it one bit, and it didn't seem like the mage had been listening to him when Bob made his request. However, Bob knew that people shouldn't be judged by appearances. He believed in the rumor that the crazier a mage was, the more powerful they were. He had just requested the mages squad to solve this case less than 2 hours ago, and they solved it already. It was already considered a huge event for there to be a murder in such a quiet small town. As the mayor, Bob had been under much pressure to solve the case, so he had requested help from some new adventurers in the area. However, this adventuring team seemed to consist of some strange members. There was a beast man, a dragon, an elf, a druid, and even humans. This motley crew seemed unreliable. But now, the solved case proved that they were reliable after all. The criminal had confessed, and all the evidence was found as well. It was now an ironclad case that he could tell the villagers about. He was quite happy with his own choice of choosing these adventurers, and kept thanking the team's members. When Roland finally recovered from his depression, the 15 silver coins earned from solving this case had already transformed into an abundant feast for tonight's dinner as well as 2 weeks' worth of travelers' inns fees. Although this still wasn't considered much money, it was the largest amount of money they had received in the entire past month. Unlike stories told in epics and legends, real adventuring squads were just like this. This was especially all the more so in the relatively peaceful Central Plains. Ordinary adventurers spent most of their time helping this little boy find his family dog, or helping that little girl deliver a love letter. Tiny quests like these. Rather than calling them adventurers, they were more like a bunch of hired temporary workers. Some people became adventurers in order to have a stimulating, adventurous career. However, the fact was that dragon slaying or demon hunting missions were quite rare, and also had high requirements of one's power level. The top level adventuring squads that had the ability required to do such missions would also have to carefully consider the risk-reward ratio whenever they coincidentally came across such high difficulty missions. The Lagraz kingdom that we were currently in had been at peace for many years, so there was very little chaos within this country. At the very most, some gnomes appearing at the border would be considered the greatest threat, and even the Lagrange royal knights would fight with each other for the opportunity to gain some glory and military achievements. It was even worse for the adventurers in this kingdom, as any adventurers and mercenaries with even the slightest speck of ambition would consider going to other countries instead. Of course, in any area where there was non-stop warfare, that location's adventurers and mercenaries might even be stronger than the local armies. Those that fought monsters every day in order to grow stronger and even dared to accept missions to participate in war were completely different from local adventurers. After all, there were quite a few examples of mercenary or adventurer leaders that had become real kings. Only relying on quest and mission rewards obviously wasn't enough, so most adventurers' income still relied on victory loot. There were quite a few adventurers that even stole from or attacked those who hired them, which was why adventurers and mercenaries as a whole had somewhat bad reputations. This was all the more so for newly born adventuring squads that didn't establish any reputation yet. Without any reputation, they would be considered untrustworthy. That was why most adventuring squads took careful steps to protect and improve their own reputations. Any slightly higher level quests or missions would also have requirements of the adventuring squad's reputation and overall power level. Not just anyone would be able to accept such tasks. Old Bob chose the Silver Coin Squad that had basically zero reputation, mostly because a murder case in a farming town like this was destined to be unprofitable to begin with. The amount of money the town could afford to pay was pitifully small. Large mercenary squads and veteran adventuring teams wouldn't even take a second look, which was why he tried hiring this squad of youngsters. He didn't expect that they instantly solved the case, which was a happy surprise for him. As for me, I had carefully selected this border town that was close to the Bardi Empire. One side of the city was walled off by mountains. The Elohim Mountains extended for several thousand kilometers, and every week people would come out of the mountains in order to explore the world. Obviously, becoming an adventurer to work for a living was an excellent and common choice for a temporary job, which was why it was quite easy to get accepted as an adventurer here. The officials here wouldn't possibly go through the trouble of entering the mountains to check your identities, and adventuring squads consisting of members from the same hometown were quite common. However, there weren't many adventuring squads that would choose to stay for long in such a peaceful little town with very little profits to be earned. As for the Silver Coin Squad, the high number of people moving through this town meant that it would be easy to fake our identities. There were few permanent residents and management was lax, which would greatly decrease our troubles. We could train together here in this town and get used to each other, while also learning how to imitate the locals' accents. This would help us in doing what we needed in this surrounding area. As for me, I had an epic quest which required me to go to the Cloud Tower in the Mage Country to activate the next portion. I was supposed to talk to the Truth Overseer named Aslawan, which was obviously for something important. However, I didn't intend to go there immediately since there was 1 year given on the time limit to begin with. I wouldn't feel reassured unless I first went to the Bardi Empire to take a look at the undead plane dimensional door that was rumored to exist. I was feeling quite anxious about it. In order to make more accurate decisions, it was extremely necessary to disguise myself and somehow get into the Bardi Empire. Originally, I had intended to directly enter the Bardi Empire, but their ridiculously distorted and strict governmental control over all adventurers and mages would obviously be a huge problem. If we were surrounded by an undead emperor as well as the Bardi Empire's army and attack from all sides, it would be quite fun, which was why I instead chose to enter from a neighboring country. The Lagraz kingdom wasn't strong. However, its royalty was related in blood to the Bardi royalty, so it had a decent relationship with their neighbor, the Bardi Empire. It was common for citizens from both countries to visit each other. Also, while this town we were in wasn't a large or flourishing one, it was very close to the main road leading to the Bardi Empire. Inns and tolls on the main road were too expensive, so there were many veteran travelers staying in this town who wanted to save money by resting somewhere slightly farther away. My idea was quite simple. Since there were often merchants coming to and fro, they would, of course, be hiring guards. When we met some rich Bardi merchant who had a sufficient amount of status, all we had to do was find an appropriate opportunity to display enough power in front of him and have him be the cover to help us get into the Bardi Empire. The stronger a dimensional door was, the larger it would be. The moment it was activated fully, there would be an incredibly obvious movement in the elemental tide. It would be impossible to conceal. I expected that I would be able to complete my preliminary scouting objectives simply by following some Bardi merchant around. But it's so boring just waiting. I've already helped little Catherine next door find her missing cat 6 times already. Should I just give her Harlois in order to coax this foolish naughty child who keeps feeding her cat nothing but bones and lollipops? Since the situation in the Northlands was going well, and I currently wasn't pressed for time, I was actually quite enjoying these fun days that were just like a vacation. Of course, since our adventuring squad consisted of quite a motley arrangement of species, we spent far more money in town than we earned. The villagers here ended up seeing us as being led by a second-rate mage with too much money on his hands, together with his bodyguard, the buff and muscular eagle-est worm, his concubines, all the women, and pet cat, a certain Harlois who really loved to buy me, on a Chonobu adventure. It was completely understandable. Several weeks had passed, and Little Red had polished off every single last barrel of alcohol in this entire town. We had been grinding every single available quest in this little town, but still hadn't met upon an appropriate opportunity with a bardy merchant yet. However, another person that we had arranged to meet with found me at this time. Lilith, you came here quicker than expected. Where's Amelia? Note: 1. The author really likes using this Detective Conan quote. 2. They are both Japanese manga series. 3. All of this is a long journey to the west reference. Chapter 263, Dimensional Descent. Originally named Phenom Milan, Lilith Milan was a high-level member of the Blood Tribe as well as the main character of Sleeping Beauty. Events in her past caused her to lose her trust in men and not feel safe around them, and she was now sexually interested in only women. Yet ever since our time in Sulphur Mountain City, she was my most trusted subordinate. Fine, the main reason for this was that my other subordinates were too unreliable and unworthy of my trust. She would separate personal matters from work and would always keep her cool during incidents. Trusted by all her companions, she possessed a great deal of common sense. This was most important. This last part alone made her stand far above a certain group of bastards. However, Amelia's appearance had exposed Lilith's true familial history and identity. This had led the higher-ups of the Church of Law to a standstill. They weren't sure whether she would leave because of this. Without her, things would become incredibly difficult, which would be a disaster. Luckily, she had made her choice known to everyone by silently continuing to work as needed. She had chosen to remain in the church. That was why we all were astonished when Amelia and her had suddenly left a few weeks ago. They had only left a short message with no clear explanation. Although we did possess the ability to keep in touch with each other, it was still quite a surprise for me to meet her here. Why are you here? Wasn't Amelia together with you? Where is she? Lilith's face was quite pale as she shook her head. The blood seeping out from the corner of her mouth explained everything. Upon taking a closer look, it was evident that she was in a bad condition. You're injured? It appears quite serious. Lilith's life had been changed by a secret forbidden spell. She was a special, one-of-a-kind blood tribe. Basically, she was a type of true ancestor. Although she was quite young, for a blood tribe member, not only did she practically not have a fear of sunlight, but her power level was quite high as well. Vampires were also naturally talented at recovering from their injuries. That was why it was definite that she had received some serious injuries. She had even lost control of her blood, the most precious thing to any blood tribe member. Cough. I was a little injured, and didn't suck any blood. I instantly understood. Due to some certain preferences of hers, Lilith had always relied on certain women that she got along well with as food sources, and had never attacked or killed anyone. As a blood tribe member who served the Church of Law, her morals were a little too proper and outstanding. Even if she was heavily injured, she had no intentions of attacking others to help herself recover. Although she had made it all the way here, her injuries must have only gotten worse. She was almost unable to control her instincts anymore. It seemed like her eyes were turning green as she looked at Yuan. Why was this picky eater only looking at Yuan? She had known crows for many years already and obviously know what crows had been in the past, not to mention that crows had been sent out with a task to do today. Harlois had a beautiful outer appearance, but her blood tribe instinct kept reminding her that there was definitely a scary monster under that beautiful appearance, so she definitely wouldn't touch Harlois. Little Red's dragon blood would be incredibly healthy and beneficial for her, but Lilith wouldn't even dare to mention this in front of her. So, her only choice was this grey elf female knight. I can still go on. Yet judging by how she was spitting blood as she spoke, it was obviously not a good idea to have her go on like this. No matter if it was a druid's life magic or a holy knight's holy healing magic, they would only have the opposite effect on a blood tribe. Any herbs or medicines wouldn't work on her undead body, either. If she lost any more blood, it would likely be difficult for her to maintain her sense of reason. I'll do it. Although Yuan had said so, I knew that she couldn't. Part of the moonlight ritual involved using needles to continuously pierce the skin, which would cause a large amount of blood loss. It would be quite difficult for Yuan to donate any blood at this time, Not to mention that Blood Tribe members often lost control of themselves when injured. It would be quite unfortunate if Lilith accidentally killed Yuan. Who else, then? Alright, if none of the women could do, then Lilith decided to make do with a man. Taking a look around, Lilith saw that Cohen was too weak, Eagle Storm was too old, and she was scared of infectious disease as if she bit Beifing. Finally, her green-tinged eyes landed on me, and she was astonished to discover that her master's blood had an appetizing aroma, resembling that of 300-year-old wine. Master. That ravenous stare made me break out into a cold sweat. When I looked around me, everyone backed away and looked at me with expressions of satisfaction at my upcoming disaster. Well, I could only fill in this pit that I had dug for myself. I helplessly reached out my arm and furled up my sleeve. I looked out the window and didn't dare watch the sight. Please be light with me. I'm more scared of receiving needle shots than anything. Oh, right, my veins are a bit deep. It won't take you a few extra bites, will it? Look and make sure before you bite down. Alright then. At the very least, she was much better than certain clumsy nurses in my previous world and made me bleed with a single bite. However, even though I had clearly reached out with my arm, what hurt instead was my neck. Who said that it was a pleasurable experience having blood sucked by a Blood Tribe member? Come out, I promise not to beat you to death. As for that strange and numbing wonderful sensation that came afterwards, it was definitely a mistaken impression. Yep, a mistaken impression. What a wondrous and rare flavor. As expected of Princess P, shut up. If you keep talking about that, no more blood for you. You're saying that a dimensional descent appeared? How is this possible? Yes, Aunt Amelia, why does this sound so awkward to me? Met an incredibly powerful opponent, and we were separated. But before we lost each other, she came to such a conclusion. Soon, Lilith was fully reinvigorated and filled with energy again. So she gave me an explanation of everything. It turned out that Amelia had left because of a huge incident after all. The border clashes between the Bardi Empire and Mage Country had turned into all-out warfare, but just such a small matter wouldn't have moved Amelia. Ultimately, she was both one of the highest-ranked mages in the Mage Country as well as a member of the Bardi royalty. Not only that, she hadn't participated in either country's affairs for so many years already, and due to certain ridiculous habits of hers, both sides probably wanted to remove her name from their ranks. What really made Amelia decide to take action was a piece of news that one of her subordinates in the Bardi Empire privately sent her. This message mentioned that in Port Victoria, a major merchant port city which recently joined the Bardi Empire, a large amount of blood sacrifice incidents had appeared. There even seemed to be signs of the presence of high-level undead. Also, more than 20 strange black towers had been erected outside of the city, with some purple black crystals lighting up the tower tips. There were even sounds of souls wailing reported to be heard in the vicinity. Soul summoning towers were incredibly common in undead magic. They were a type of magic user's personal base, very similar to an archmage's mage tower. There were countless different functions and sizes based on customization, but all of them would have some basic functions in common. Summoning the souls of the dead and cultivating the souls into an undead mage's magic power, which would increase the power of their undead magic. As long as there was a sufficient number of dead and their souls in the soul summoning towers area, an undead archmage would have basically limitless mana. This was also part of the reason why the gods despised the undead. However, the creator of soul summoning towers didn't dare go too overboard to the point of interfering with the cycle of reincarnation. The souls that were drained of their mana could still enter into the cycle of reincarnation after the undead mage was done with them. However, that was only possible if they didn't turn into undead because of the extremely painful process of draining their mana that would leave them with countless grudges. When comparing soul summoning towers with mage towers, the former was slightly weaker than the latter, but due to the fact that materials needed for the former's construction were undead materials, they were much cheaper to construct. They were easier to construct as well, taking up much less time, so it was a product that could be said to be of high quality and cheap. Of course, the side effect would be that everyone would come attack you. Not only that, any place that erected soul summoning towers doubtlessly meant that there were high-level undead present there, which would cause the Holy Church to immediately send people to attack them. But the Bardi Empire has already exiled the Holy Church and all Holy Light Job class members. The Bardi Empire is also remaining strangely silent on this matter. Port Victoria's various organizations and citizens can only think of their own ways to survive. Aunt Amelia has a friend living there. But unfortunately, when we arrived, everything was already in chaos. The undead plane has begun its dimensional descent already. Lilith's tale caused everyone hearing it to inhale cold air. Although she said it so lightly, everyone here who knew what a dimensional descent was could already imagine a scene that was like hell on Ike. But what astonished me even more was that Amelia actually had a friend. Cough, cough. I should get back to the main topic. You're absolutely certain that it's a dimensional descent and not simply the opening of the undead plane dimensional door? Yes, it's Aunt Amelia's assessment. With everything that's happened after that as well, there should be no mistake. Dimensional descent was a specialized term that even mages rarely used. This term referred to what would happen if two planes got sufficiently close enough to each other. Parts of some areas would begin overlapping. This would typically appear near the closest areas to the dimensional door. For example, if the Earth Elemental dimensional door at Anshuan really succeeded in opening, then the surrounding environment would have begun showing signs of elementalization. The large amounts of naturally born small and mid-sized earth elementals were the best evidence of this. However, in most normal cases, even if a dimensional door succeeded in completely opening, at most the area around the dimensional door would change to match the other plane's environment. A complete dimensional overlap wouldn't appear. To use an analogy, the change to the environment that a dimensional door typically brought about was like adding some sugar to water and making it into sugar water, while a dimensional descent was like squeezing 2 cups of water into 1 cup of water, which would likely result in the cup breaking. If one of the elemental planes performs a dimensional descent, then more than half of everything living in the surrounding area will instantly die off. Those still left alive would have characteristics of elemental creatures and would never be able to live normally on the mortal plane again. If the undead plane, which is filled with death, performs a dimensional descent, doubtlessly, Harl Ois, who was an expert on magic, had the greatest right to make an assessment of what would happen. Yet judging from her current expression and silence, it was obvious that she didn't have much hope for Port Victoria. I believe in Amelia's ability to assess the situation. If the undead plane really is performing a dimensional descent, then we should consider not going there to save anyone. All the living will instantly turn into the dead, and part of the undead plane will appear there. And it's probably a permanent effect. This is far more troublesome than any land of death. I nodded in agreement. Harloy's assessment, which she had finally ended up giving, was basically the same as what I was thinking. However, I had thought of even more troubles. If that place has already transformed into a part of the undead plane, then that means some existences that are limited by dimensional natural laws will be able to descend there. No wonder Amelia met with trouble. There's a high probability that she met a real undead emperor. It was obvious that the major city Port Victoria would become nothing more than a page of history. Its population of almost 1 million residents had completely turned into undead, and the veterans of the undead plane had their own home bases established there now. But, I was thinking of how the Bardi Empire was destined to leave its name in the history books for infamy, having paid such a large price. A price that was likely only going to grow even larger. There's no response from the Bardi government? None at all, and news about it has been suppressed. When I managed to escape, I even saw knights in the surrounding area keeping the main road leading to Port Victoria on the lockdown. Gaped undead were also openly talking to military officials, while skeleton soldiers and zombies were being organized and commanded by human officers. It's obvious that they've already reached an accord. And? I heard some news that the Bardi government's official channels are announcing that the new undead armies are here to help the Bardi Empire defeat the Mage Country. Although it caused quite a lot of resistance, it all seems to have been suppressed. As a Port Victoria was obviously by the sea. And right across the sea from Port Victoria was the Mage Country. I was basically able to guess their intentions from these pieces of information. The merchant city Port Victoria originally belonged to another country and was a location that the Bardi Empire had recently obtained. It wasn't a place that they highly valued to begin with. A merchant city like Port Victoria wouldn't have many military ships stationed, while the ones present, typically the small and medium-sized merchant ships, wouldn't be able to carry many people. Even if Barty's renowned land armies went on ships into the Strait of Debo, they'd be nothing more than easy targets unable to conveniently use the advantages that they had on land. After receiving more and more information, I had a guess, but there would be a huge amount of trouble if I was on the mark. I directly stated what I was thinking. How wide is the Strait of Debo? I only want the straight line distance. Yawn took out a map and measured it with a ruler. When she converted the distance scale on the map, she suddenly lifted her head. Less than 200 kilometers. If the undead army makes a sudden march, one night will be more than enough. Undead weren't afraid of fatigue and didn't need to breathe. Natural barriers that were impossible obstacles for other living creatures were nothing in front of them. The ocean waters were treacherous. Ocean waves were tall enough to capsize vessels. While that may be true for the ocean's surface, the bottom of the ocean was always calm. All the port areas where vessels could land at in the Mage Country were heavily guarded. In that case, just find any random unguarded area to climb ashore. These were all tactics I had used back in the day to make use of the special characteristics of the undead, attacking with unexpected methods. Yet since I had made these precedents, it was only natural that they became standard undead attacking strategies. With all this information, the big picture was getting quite obvious. But even the ruler of an empire wouldn't be able to act entirely as he pleased, making such obviously ridiculous policies. At the very least, he would have to convince all the factions within his country and give the other factions red herrings of benefits to be gained. He would have to convince his subordinates somehow. The current Barty Empire was still likely at a cooperative stage with the undead emperors. As long as the undead were able to prove their worth, there would be plenty more cooperative opportunities between them and the Barty Empire in the future. And of course the undead would help the Barty Empire even more in the future. Since Port Victoria was formerly an enemy country's city that had been recently conquered, why would the Barty Empire care about it? If the undead armies suddenly ambushed the Mage Country from underwater with high-level undead assisting them, then even the Mage Country might not be able to defend against them. Perhaps Amelia heard some news about this, which was why she personally went. Lilith, do you have more detailed information about what happened to Amelia? Lilith anxiously shook her head. She seemed to lack self-confidence. No. Not long after we arrived, the dimensional descent occurred. Of course, as a member of the Blood Tribe, I was fine. But, no matter how strong Aunt Amelia is, she's still a human, and apparently she recently fought against someone powerful and was a little injured. However, I smiled at Lilith's anxiousness. Perhaps this would be the brink for others, but I didn't at all feel like that maniacal witch would have any problems. Her existence had already exceeded the capabilities of life. Relax, she's even less a member of the human species than you are. Relax, Lady Lilith. I can sense that in that direction, Lady Amelia's life forces are still blazing strongly. Not only 1 month, but I think she can easily maintain herself there for another 2 or 3 years. She's not the one in trouble. The undead that angered her are the ones who have to worry. Eagle Storm, who had been closing his eyes and thinking, suddenly spoke up and made such a statement. Lilith, however, only believed his words half-heartedly. There was such a great physical distance between them, it seemed for even a legend-rank druid to make such a statement with confidence. However, Harlois and I exchanged glances. Back in the Earth Elemental Plane, Eagle Storm had also witnessed Amelia's complete form. As a druid who lived in the forests, it was basically a national talent of his to sense a forest. If he said that Amelia would be fine for the time being, then it was very likely true. Even at the very worst, Amelia would be forced to reveal her true form, and she still wouldn't be easily dealt with. I was able to somewhat relax when I thought of this. Yet all these things had happened, and I had already decided on what to do for the next part of our little excursion. Hurry up with our preparations and gather all the equipment we need. At the very latest, we shall move out on the day after tomorrow. It'll be best if we can find a Barty merchant, as that's the best way to sneak in. If not, we'll have to secretly cross the border. Chapter 264, Progress. Unlike the snow-covered Northlands, spring arrived early in the central plains of the south. The temperature would rise quickly within 2 weeks of the first spring rain, and spring's arrival would be accompanied by numerous showers. To use the church's way of saying things, the winter goddess Dranya decided to give her power over to the spring goddess Arshir. Amid this warm season of blooming flowers, the plants that had hibernated during the winter sprouted new buds. Starving animals began their search for food. A new year had brought with it a new cycle, all living creatures were reinvigorated, and new lives were born in this golden era. Alright then, I'll stop speaking poetically and start talking about more practical things. Yep. Let's talk about making money. Spring brought with it plenty of business opportunities. In this era of cold weapons, traveling typically relied on horses and horse-drawn carriages. In winter, the roads were caked in ice, and traveling was inconvenient. The transportation of goods and daily life products would be quite slow. Throughout the winter, families and stores would use up many goods, and when it ended, there would be a need for restocking. This was why each spring was a golden opportunity for any merchant to make money. It was also considered acceptable to raise their prices slightly. The high demand at this time of year would allow merchants who specialized in this line of work to make an astonishing amount in their first cargo shipment of the year. It would amount to a staggering 30% of their entire profits for a whole year. The Lagraz Kingdom was a major producer of silk, green obsidian crystals, redwood, and Rosmarinus trifoliate. Among their exported products, green obsidian crystals and Rosmarinus trifoliate were both magical ingredients, and redwood was an excellent wood for crafting mage staves. These magical ingredients were all highly sought after by both the mage country and the Bardi Empire. Since the market had demand, there would always be sellers. All the merchant groups would head out immediately after the final snow of the new year and sell off local products in other countries for profits. Then, in another country like the Bardi Empire, they would use their profits to buy various local products and sell them back in the Lagraz Kingdom for enormous profits. However, just like my original world in the past, the great profits to be gained from the importing and exporting of goods would be accompanied by great risks. If merchants ran into bandits or unscrupulous governmental officials, it would be considered lucky if they could retain even half of their wares. If they were even unluckier, they might even run into military situations, political affairs, or even warfare and other unpredictable factors, which would cause them to lose everything. Yet, in this generation, the most dangerous of all was to attract the attention of some domain lord. After all, no matter how great a merchant's connections were, they would still be limited in a country that wasn't their home. Some major nobles treated stealing wealth from foreign merchants as free breakfast as long as there was some passable excuse they could come up with. As ordinary people wouldn't dare to take up the import-export trade, there would obviously be no ordinary people in this business. Those that dared to become import-export merchants were typically very difficult to take down. Many would have extremely strong supports, sometimes even being connected to the royalty of their origin country. They would be unafraid of the extortions of a normal domain lord. Some would have sufficient strength to protect themselves, and some would have their own personal mercenary groups or something similar. After all, the fact that they were able to protect themselves in foreign lands meant that they had trustworthy combat strength available in their hands. The leader of the Vegi Merchant Association had no connections to royalty or nobles and was obviously of the latter type. Although this merchant association was only a new one that had existed for a little less than 20 years, the hard work and careful management of the Vegi family's leaders helped them successfully monopolize the trade routes between Bardi Empire's Ainlizo City and Lagraz Kingdom's Antan City. The scale of their mercenaries matched that of a small domain lord's army. However, there was something different about the situation this year. It seems that the best I can hope for is that I won't lose everything. Cindy Vegi, aged 46, was one of the higher-ups of the Vegi Merchant Association. He had been conducting import-export trade along this route for almost 30 years now. Yet unlike past years, news about the Bardi Empire's situation had been murky recently. All sorts of rumors abound. Skilled merchants were instinctively sensitive to danger. In their eyes, a major upheaval within a country was synonymous to problems in its economy. Recently, there had been many rumors about strange magical monsters and undead appearing within the Bardi Empire, which greatly decreased the amount of merchants traveling between the Bardi Empire and the Lagraz Kingdom. Cindy gazed at an approaching thunderstorm as he mused to himself. He was quite worried about the situation. Unfortunately, There was nothing he could do about it. Many orders had been placed with their merchant association in the previous year, and several of them were from old customers that had been with them for over a decade. He absolutely couldn't afford to anger them. No matter what, he had to make this trip to the Bardi Empire. Unusual circumstances would require additional measures. The leader of the Vegi Merchant Association was willing to spare no expense and paid heavy fees to invite 2 of the top 10 mercenary groups in the Lagraz Kingdom. They had even required that the groups send out high-level elite combat strength to come guard them. As a result, the strong were indeed willing to be hired by them. The leader of the Eagle of Siolo mercenary group, Meteor Sword Just, and the leader of Northhorn mercenary group, White Dragon Carlogier personally arrived to guard them. These 2 individuals were both very famous for their strength in the Lagraz Kingdom, and, as agreed, they brought their elite subordinates to guard the Vegi Merchant Association. The problem was that the expected profits from this time's import-export trip weren't going to be enough to pay the price to hire these 2 mercenary groups. Heavens, please don't let us meet with any trouble, especially not those undead that don't care about their lives. If the hired mercenaries didn't meet with any combat situations, the typical way that they worked was that they would only have to be paid 80 or 90% of the originally agreed upon price. There also wouldn't be any need to compensate their losses, so that would be the best case scenario. The Vegi Merchant Association would at least make enough money to cover all their costs. Sir Cindy, why do you always look so depressed? The weather's really nice today. You should be happy that we can make good progress due to the weather. In Cindy's eyes, this blonde-haired boy, who was all smiles, appeared to be only 15 or 16 years old. However, after talking a bit more with him, Cindy felt more and more like he didn't understand this boy named Rollo. Rollo seemed childish and ridiculous, but was especially talented in the merchant business. Some random sentences that he would say would require Cindy to ponder for quite a while before he understood them, and, in the end, he would feel like they were quite logical. These strange members of the Silver Coin Squad came to Cindy of their own volition and offered to be hired as mercenaries for an incredibly low price, which astonished him. At first, he thought that there was some plot, but he understood when he looked at the wares that they were carrying. He must have thought too much about things, and they probably only intended to seek protection from a large merchant convoy. Their offer of working for cheap was only a cover for wanting to borrow his much larger group to help them make a small profit. Normally, this type of joining in midway was somewhat taboo and typically wouldn't be accepted. However, when Cindy directly told them that he had seen through their real intentions of joining him for protection, they admitted it quite honestly and even offered to pay him a sizable sum. We absolutely need to deliver this shipment of Winlow grape wine. Right now, the world isn't peaceful, so how could we dare to travel by our weak little selves? We'll pay you, and if there really is trouble on the way, it's always safer with more people. Of course, how useful the bribe paid to Cindy was in allowing them to travel with him was unknown. Right, Captain Rollo, could you tell me more about what you said yesterday regarding the relationship between banks' loans and market prices? There were some things that I didn't quite understand. For example, if I can talk to the banks and... For Cindy, who had been a merchant for 2/3 of his life, he had gained much knowledge over the past few days. Although this Rollo fellow was quite young, his knowledge was vast, which was to be expected of a mage. About loans, banks, and... well, according to his vocabulary, he called it all finance. His personal opinions were completely different from the norm regarding this subject. Although it seemed to be a deviation, when Cindy carefully thought about what Rollo said, they sounded quite reasonable. Meanwhile, as I listened to Cindy, who was endlessly prattling on about the merchant business, I was regretting why I hadn't stopped my stupid mouth from saying all those random things about finance. Originally, I had just intended to pretend to be a merchant as a convenient way to join them, so I randomly picked some economic theories from my original world to tell him. I never expected that he took them so seriously to the extent that he now wants to know everything about economics. I was a law major, okay. I'm not interested in economics to begin with. How would I possibly know about the foundational workings of economics? If he asks me any longer, I'll have to start making things up. The best way to make a lie seem like the truth was to put the lie within another lie that would easily be seen through. This would make intelligent people reveal the lie by themselves, finding the truth that they were looking for. Meeting Cindy's merchant group was an unexpected lucky occurrence for me. However, joining them when they were all highly on guard was difficult. If we volunteered and recommended ourselves just like that, we would most likely be rejected, and if we showed off our true abilities, it would instead make them think that we had some nefarious plot. So, I decided to purchase some grape wine as cargo and made up a story about someone in the Bardi Empire ordering it. I intended to pretend to be a small merchant who was simultaneously trying to save money by being a mercenary. However, the result gave me a headache. My disguise had been too successful, as after I told Cindy some words that I only happened to hear before in my past life, he actually treated these sayings as valuable treasures. If he kept asking me, I might get exposed as a fraudulent merchant. SHH, this is a forbidden topic. Alright, since I didn't know how to respond, I decided to treat it as a secret I didn't want to tell him. Although it was totally uncute of me to answer in such a fashion, he actually viewed me with even greater importance. He changed from speaking directly to talking in a roundabout fashion, and tried striking up a conversation with me every day, all in order to dig up some more of my opinions about commerce. Today was the third day since we joined them and left Buja town. This guy actually came to find me early in the morning for more questions, and just as I was intending to make some stuff up, our attention was attracted to the sudden sounds of arguing and weapons clashing. Again? We all felt helpless. No matter if it was in literary or martial circles, nobody liked being numbered two. Those in the same line of work would always be competitors, and one of the side effects of us joining this merchant group as an adventuring squad acting as guards was to make the other two mercenary groups view us with displeasure and enmity. We already accepted this guarding mission. Originally, we're already displeased with the two major mercenary groups splitting the guarding fees, so what's with you all butting in? Even though we already said that we wouldn't ask for any of their fees, sometimes those in this line of work only wanted to fight for their face. Over the past 2 days, the other two mercenary groups had challenged us numerous times. Normally speaking, since we were the ones in the wrong to begin with, this would all be over if we just let them win once. Yet although I kept telling my members to act weaker than they really were, none of them were that weak to begin with. All of them promised me so prettily face to face but immediately broke their promises when I wasn't watching. In the end, those mercenaries were the ones on the losing end, and the two much larger mercenary groups that had lost repeatedly kept hoping to regain their face, but this resulted in them losing over and over again. And, right now, this was doubtlessly yet another argument caused by some accident. Suddenly, a purple magic flash appeared in the sky above our camp. The source of the light came from where everyone was gathered. That should be Captain Just's famous epic ranked weapon, the meteor sword. As expected of Just, a gold ranked weapon master. His attack is so frightening. It seems that he's become serious. It's already at such an extent, but Captain Rollo, you're not worried about your own people being injured? I shook my head, smiling wryly. Worried? Of course I'm worried, but I'm worried about that meteor sword fellow. Let's go over there and take a look. I hope that nothing will happen. Damn it, that idiot actually challenged Little Red. Cindy, do you have any coffins in your cargo? I'll buy one. Oh, whoops, it looks like a coffin will be unnecessary. Do you have any gravestones? While Roland and his companions were still on the road, the Bardi Empire's plan for an ambush met with an unexpected amount of trouble. With the assistance of the activation of many black obsidian soul summoning towers, the human-made dimensional descent of the undead plane had indeed succeeded. Large amounts of low-level undead were created. However, in this area filled with death, where even the colors of the world had become gray and white, there was an abnormal patch of green that incredibly stood out. You still haven't figured out what that is? Damn it. Why is there a forest here? And it's a forest that actually attacks undead on its own. The Lich had been under the impression that he had received a simple task. All he had to do was command and control a large number of low-level undead to slaughter a bunch of completely unprepared humans. However, the abnormal forest that suddenly appeared had delayed his original plans far beyond what he expected. When he thought about the extremely brutal and cruel methods that undead emperors like to use on those who failed to carry out their orders, Alu felt a chill run down his spine, and this was despite the fact that he should have lost the ability to have such sensations. Sir, There are more and more strange plants gathering in that forest. The forest is also expanding, and the most inconceivable of all is the black-robed blood tribe, Kaka, spoke softer and softer. He seemed to be guessing and sounded quite uncertain. What is it? Just say it. It really resembles that recently popular game, Plants vs. Zombies. All those plant types are from that game. I'm a big player of that game and recognize this instantly. And, all those plants are specially modified to work against the undead. Those pea shooters are actually capable of shooting bullets of light, while those magical vines can actually absorb undead magic, and the plant bombs actually contain holy water inside. This entire forest seems like the natural enemy of the undead. Alu paused in surprise but then reacted with extreme anger. He used a magical large handcrafted device to grab that unlucky blood tribe member Kaka. What? Our undead army has actually become someone else's game? Are others viewing us as mere monkeys monkeying around? The furious Lich thought about what would happen to him if he didn't finish his task, and his mana began to seep out uncontrollably. All the high-level undead near him hurriedly retreated. Only the unlucky Kaka, who was freezing to the extent of turning pale in the ice claw's grip, was struggling to find a way to save himself. Sir, since the enemy's troops are all commonly seen in a game, we can also think of ways to deal with the plants from the same game. The Lich Alu nodded as he rubbed his chin, which consisted of nothing but bones. Such as? The unlucky blood tribe member forced his brain to work and somehow came up with a few ideas. For example, burrowing zombies, flying zombies, and buckethead zombies. Plants can only block from one direction, and we can send an aerial undead and take a circuitous route around them. There are so many methods. 1. Yep, not bad. Take some troops with you and lead the way. Alright. At least dying in battle would be slightly better than being executed by his boss. Kaka wanted to cry as he led a fresh batch of undead armies to battle. However, the result remained the same. Flying zombies? Dandelion seed bombs were waiting for them. Burrowing zombies? The magical vines and plants' roots had long since created a terrifying underground network. Equipping the zombies with steel buckets as protection? Gigantic piranha plants that suddenly popped out from underground swallowed everything. Taking circuitous routes? This was reality, not a game. Hills and plains were covered with this forest, so how could they succeed in flanking it? And the lucky, or unlucky, Kaka managed to survive as a miracle with injuries and tatters all over. He had only half a breath left in him, but when he saw how Alu's eyes were burning with cyan-colored soul flames, he suddenly felt like it would have been better for him to not return. What else do you have to say for yourself? Sir, it's not our fault for being useless. That forest is cheating. All those plant troops types are ultra rares. Random draws for several tens of thousands of gold coins might not even give you one, but it has all of them. This is basically no different from a pay-to-win player abusing a free-to-play player. It's too much. Crack. With the sound of ice freezing over, the blood tribe member, who was addicted to games, was frozen into cubes of ice. The furious Alu turned to his subordinates, only to see that all of them were avoiding his gaze. In the end, he could only give his orders helplessly. Everyone, attack. Have the soul summoning towers continue creating new undead. We're going to go all out. Let's see who can win in a war of attrition. We absolutely must carry out the undead emperor's will, otherwise. You all understand. Note: 1. All Plants vs. Zombies references. Chapter 265, Proclamation and Master of Shooting Himself in the Foot. The holy city of Istadi was one of the most famous cities in all of Ike, with a long history and a unique religious culture that was famed throughout the lands. Every day, countless admirers of the holy light would come visit this divine capital, which was filled with holy light. Although Istadi wasn't a large city, a majority of its residents held divine job classes. This small city contained 7 world-class churches and hundreds of small and medium-sized churches. They were all on the level of historical relics. And, in this mountainside city, there was a famous flight of stairs carved into the side of the mountain. These were the famous stairs of holy light, and every single moment one could see admirers of the holy light climbing up these steps. There was an endless number of beautiful sculptures lining both sides of these stairs, including those of ancient heroes, historical figures, and the most common of all, various people from legendary tales who had a strange variety of appearances. However, more than 300 years ago, there was one maniac who had managed to single-handedly transform these famous stairs of holy light into stairs of blood, and he didn't even receive any form of divine punishment. From then on, the stairs of holy light became the stairs of blood. Alright, with so much explanation, everybody probably knows what Istati is. Istati was the main headquarters of the Holy Church as well as the place where holy light had first descended. It was the origin of the Holy Church. If you walked to the end of those famous white stone steps and arrived at the mountaintop, you would see a collection of seemingly shakily constructing buildings, the headquarters of the Holy Church. This was the most important area of the church and enjoyed more than half of all religious faith in the land. It could even be called the place where the most power was centralized in all of Ike, the main holy sanctuary. In the past, those who passed by this area would walk slowly with their heads held high. The people who lived here would act as if they were born with the right to be proud, and, in fact, this was indeed the case. There would forever be conflicts between religious and divine authorities, and in that generation, even a powerful domain lord wouldn't dare to antagonize a local head priest. Perhaps a poor, old priest living nearby would be appreciated by some cardinal and turn into a major personage of some empire the very next day. Obviously, reality was always stranger than fiction, and this sort of thing was actually quite common. Today, however, everyone was in a hurry and spoke cautiously as they snuck peeks at the place filled with holy light. There's still no result. All the cardinals have been inside for so long. At roughly 3 o'clock in the morning, the holy bell at the entrance of the main holy sanctuary had started ringing, which signified that every high-level church member and cardinal had to arrive here on time within 30 minutes. Although this bell wasn't the warning bell that signified an immediate combat situation, the last such time this meeting bell had been rung was more than 20 years ago. It was obvious that something major had happened. Even though they didn't show it on the surface, many members of the Holy Church were secretly discussing amongst themselves, wondering what could have occurred. While the higher-ups were busy in their meeting rooms, numerous rumors had already started spreading through their subordinates. Could it be about that incident regarding the Northlands? After all, there have been so many rumors about that incident, and it's greatly affected the Holy Church's reputation. It can't be. The divine message from the God of Holy Light confirmed that there now are allies. Would His Holiness the Pope dare go against a divine message? Then what could it be about? What major incident could cause all the higher-ups to be summoned? It's basically just like the Holy War against Caution 20 years ago. The priest who was speaking trailed off at the end as he broke out into a cold sweat. For mid and low-ranked people like him, a holy war was not good news at all. Perhaps glory and the victory loot from combat would make the higher-ups overjoyed, while the glory from a holy war would also rouse fervent believers who were willing to sacrifice everything. But for ordinary members of the church, a holy war meant endless amounts of death. Any amount of gold and glory would be preceded by a mountainous pile of corpses. And it was only natural for there to not only be the corpses of heretics but the corpses of believers as well. They've come out. They've come out. It's His Holiness the Pope. When the white-robed Pope Caloma came out, his typical peaceful appearance was nowhere to be seen. That grim look on his face was the best announcement of all, causing everyone in the plaza to fall silent. The numerous cardinals and high priests that followed after him all had differing expressions. Some looked serious and didn't say a word, while others were angry to the point that their faces were red. Of course, there were some that were pretending to be serious but had yet to notice how their mouths were imperceptibly arcing upwards. From the standpoints of mortals, the recently ascended Pope Caloma was already in his 60s and could be considered an elderly man with not much time left in him. However, in history, except for the popes that died of unnatural causes, most popes would be able to complete at least 2 terms, with each term lasting 10 years. As for where the popes went after their terms were completed, perhaps only the new pope after them would know. Pope Caloma was quite obviously in a bad mood as everyone looked at him, filled with questions. He didn't intend to mince words and directly tore apart a golden scroll. The next moment, a thin and short-old man transformed into a huge divine figure that floated in the sky. This elderly voice resounded in thunderclaps, and nobody in the city of Istati was able to ignore it. Orlos from the Bardi Empire has allied himself with evil undead and sacrificed 1 million citizens of Port Victoria to the undead, an extraordinarily wicked act. After conversing amongst ourselves and listening to the will of the God of Holy Light, we, the Holy Church, hereby declare in the name of the God of Holy Light that Torlos Massiveri Saint Milan is an evil heretic. The Barda royal family's title of saint in their name is hereby revoked, and Orlos shall be considered the enemy of the Holy Church henceforth. The Pope inhaled deeply, as if to remove any final shreds of hesitation, and he grit his teeth as he declared the most important part of his announcement. Evil is right beside us, and I, Caloma I, declare with my authority as the Pope that there shall be a holy war. All those that believe in the Holy Light shall fight for the sake of Holy Light and justice and become the mortal enemies of Orlos and his evil undead allies. It wasn't a long declaration, but it shocked everyone who heard it. The Bardi Empire was no small country. Any disagreements with the Northlands were actually unimportant, as mega-empires were the main powers in Lich. For the Bardi Emperor to be declared a heretic while he was still in power meant that the entire country had been declared heretical. While it was indeed true that the Bardi Empire hadn't been very friendly towards the Holy Light in recent times, it still maintained at least the surface level of respect. Exiling the Holy Church didn't mean that they were making the Holy Church an outright enemy. But declaring a holy war now meant that all the believers of the Holy Light would become the Bardi Empire's mortal enemies. Of course, this was only in theory. Against an entity as powerful as the Bardi Empire, nobody would casually go fight them without enough benefits on the line. Unless the Holy Church acted as the vanguard and started creating an anti-Bardi Empire army, perhaps each major country would only criticize the Bardi Empire a little but take zero action. And for those countries that had direct benefits on the line regarding the Bardi Empire, such as the Mage country, this would be an easy excuse to declare an all-out war against the Bardi Empire. The most pitiful countries were the small countries nearest to the Bardi Empire. If they were part of the Holy Light religion, then they would be forced to pick a side. And if they picked the side of Holy Light, the Bardi Empire's army would probably be on their doorstep the very next day. After the Holy Church made their declaration, the human countries were highly likely to begin a vicious internal war of their own right before the eternal holy war was about to begin, no matter the reason. This was doubtlessly something that most people wouldn't want, but if Orlos continued allying himself with the undead emperors, then it was highly likely to happen regardless. And if this battle really did break out, Port Victoria, which had already become part of the undead plane, would no longer be considered important. The battle between the human mega-empires would probably cause several times more casualties than the number of humans that died at Port Victoria. This is so scary. It's even more unacceptable than the Holy War from 20 years ago. A mega-empire has actually been declared heretical. Is there going to be a world war? That's not possible. Even the Holy Church might not be able to accept such a large-scale battle. It's not 400 years ago, when the Holy Church was at its mightiest. The mega-empires won't fight with their all for the sake of the Holy Church. However, some more perceptive individuals were able to hear what Pope Caloma didn't say, rather than what he said. Orlos was the only one he declared a heretic. He also didn't mention any specific time to attack the Bardi Empire. Back in the day, the entire Mist Kingdom had been declared heretical. Only declaring the Bardi Emperor Orlos to be a heretic doubtlessly meant that there was still room for negotiation. As long as the Bardi Emperor was changed before an army set out to attack him, then there would naturally be no more need to attack the Bardi Empire on the grounds that they were heretics. Not to mention that there was also no specific time stated to attack the Bardi Empire or organizations named to attack it, which undoubtedly left plenty of room for mediation in regards to time as well. This is probably a method to divide the Bardi Empire and force the nobles there to rebel. But with Orlos' powerful iron grasp over his own country, it's difficult to say if it'll be of any use. 2 days later, when this news arrived in the Bardi Empire, it indeed caused many waves despite the fact that the Bardi government attempted to suppress this piece of news. Unfortunately, Orlos' position as emperor remained as solid as it had always been. Any domain lords that dared to resist against him had long since been killed by him decades ago, and all power was centralized in his hands. Even if there were still those that had their ambitions, what could they do? But, Some things would be difficult if not impossible to suppress for forever. There were quite a large number of Holy Light believers that kept their belief secret in the Bardi Empire, and Orlos would have to start paying more attention to his own safety whenever he went out. However, the elderly Orlos simply maintained his same routine as always, eating and sleeping as usual. Those who knew about the situation were impressed with his mental fortitude. While the Bardi Empire appeared calm on the surface, the most panicked were actually the high-level undead from the undead plane. Why are they reacting so fiercely? It's the opposite of what we expected. Perhaps it was because of that incident in the Northlands, the one that had caused the Holy Church to lose some of their reputation. This had naturally damaged Pope Caloma's reputation along with it, which possibly made him want to search for some way to save face. Perhaps it was that the incident at Port Victoria was truly too vicious, which angered Pope Caloma into taking such drastic action. An analogy for what had happened would be if two poker players were playing against each other and still testing each other out, when one player unexpectedly went all in, putting all his chips on the bet, greatly shocking the other player who was utterly unprepared. Even the cardinals that Pope Caloma summoned didn't expect their pope to take such drastic action. So of course it was the same for the undead visitors. Their cooperation with Orlos had just begun, and they hadn't even put most of their plans in motion yet, but they had already elicited such a fierce reaction from the entirety of human society and the gods' churches. What the undead expected was that the Pope should have looked more at the big picture and do his best to condemn what had happened while sending out scouts and diplomats to slowly gather information in an attempt to smooth things out. Instead, Pope Caloma had risked all-out war with the mega empire right from the very start, taking a hard stance. Damn it! Is this Pope insane? Did we dig up his ancestors' graves? This is bad. Increase the rate at which we carry out our plans. Otherwise the undead emperors will have our heads. While all the countries were reeling in shock at Pope Caloma's astonishing declaration, my party was currently at the Bardi Empire's border, relaxed and preparing to enter. When Little Red had sent that idiot who had challenged her flying with a single slap, a veteran from that idiot's mercenary troop challenged her next. He, in turn, was also sent flying with a single slap, and in the end, the arguments became worse and deep grudges were formed. Fine, I made that up. None of that could have possibly happened. Veteran mercenaries wouldn't possibly be so idiotic to become redshirts. If they made such a mess of things, causing both sides to have deep grudges when the intention was merely to test the waters and causing them to anger someone beyond their abilities to handle, then such a rash mercenary group wouldn't have survived until today. Not to mention, the leaders of both mercenary groups were both personally present. In such a situation, it would be even more ridiculous if they acted too much out of hand. The silver-ranked Cassandra was sent flying with a single slap. That ranger must be at least of the gold rank. Even the Eagle of Ciolo mercenary group leader just was sent flying with a single slap, and his epic weapon Meteor Sword was knocked out of his hands by his empty-handed opponent. He's a veteran weapon master with hundreds of battles under his belt. A gold rank? You think that black-haired woman is merely a gold rank? A legend, then? No, Captain just has also fought with legend-ranked warriors before and has never lost that badly. That means this woman must be a saint-ranked warrior at the minimum. With such a young saint-ranked warrior under his command, just who is that young master? Young master referred to a certain young-appearing mage, who only drank tea and chatted all day. The job class known as a mage was one which required the accumulation of knowledge. Other job classes could take shortcuts and level up speedily, but it was practically impossible for mages to take shortcuts. His shiny and blue archmage robe indicated that not only was he rich, but he was also quite confident in his own safety. The mercenaries weren't blind and had long since discovered that the Silver Coin Squad was led by this young man who lazed about and did nothing all day. With the excellent abilities shown by this squad's members, rumors reappeared that this adventuring team consisted of a young and rich noble together with his servants, maids, and concubines. Add on the fact that people were bored and made up stuff to add on to the rumors, and the rumors started sounding more and more real. Eagle Storm became a loyal butler, Colin a manservant, Beifeng a clown, the Capelolith a mage bodyguard, and the two elves were treated as female elven slaves that only a noble family could afford. As for Harl Ois, well, in a way, they weren't wrong about their guess. She was indeed a pet, Just not the type that they were thinking of. Oh my, that Trollo fellow stays on the carriage all day even when it's light outside. Such depravity makes me so envious, I mean enraged. Those elves and that cat girl always get on that carriage for several hours at a time. That guy has limitless stamina? Cough, cough. Although their lecherous smiles were rather obvious, at least they had some brains and didn't count the saint-ranked little red in my so-called harem. She was still treated as my bodyguard. Otherwise, if the pride of dragons reared its head, all of those lechers would certainly have been burned to ash. Those whispers behind our backs were no secret to us despite the fact that they were trying to keep their voices low. The result was that when I pointed and laughed while rolling on the floor at the silly cat who was the only one they had guessed correctly about, I received an additional set of teeth marks on my head. Getting back to the main topic at hand, no matter how speechless the process caused us to be, at least the other two major mercenary groups arrived at an accord to not antagonize this young noble out on a tour. Since this noble seemed like he was here simply to have fun, then let him have his fun. After proving our power, everything else was naturally easier. Mercenaries that didn't know whether they can live to see the next day were quite practical. When fighting with their lives on the line for the sake of money, benefits were much more important than honor. They were looking to start a fight simply for their reputations, since losing reputation meant losing money in their line of work. But they had calmed themselves down for the sake of their lives. It would obviously be suicidal if they continued antagonizing us. Besides, having an extra mercenary group around, which was strong and didn't even want a cut of the guarding pay, seemed like an excellent deal no matter how they looked at it. It's just a young guy playing around, let's not take things so seriously. Besides, it'll be bad if we antagonize some major noble. Later, both mercenary group leaders even came over of their own volition to apologize to me. Some of their higher-ups even came over to chat with us to improve our relationship, but from how I saw it, their main goal was to find out who we really were, along with wanting to hire some people from under me. I unhesitatingly decided to ignore them. If the bastards under my command had some people to amuse them, that would be for the best. Otherwise, if they got really bored, who knew what they would get up to? Soon, however, I regretted my decision. Even though that just fellow was pretty strong, he was at the gold rank, he had zero conversational skills and still kept trying to joke around with us, which was unbearable. Haha, where was I last time? Right, my joke from last time. Why do undead homes always have one less room than other species homes? I bet you can't guess, so let this uncle tell you. It's the bathroom. They don't even eat, so any bathrooms in their homes would definitely be nothing but decorations. Ha ha ha. Even though Meteor Sword just looked like a straightforward middle-aged man, he kept telling the lamest of jokes. None of us laughed at all while his companions forced themselves to laugh twice just to appease him. Is there something wrong with your leader's brain? Did Little Red beat him a little too much 2 days ago, causing him to become an idiot? Harlois had a venomous mouth as always with her comment, but surprisingly, the mercenaries from Just's group nodded and smiled dryly. He's excellent as a captain, but he has a strange sense of humor. At any rate, none of us have any expectations from his jokes, so we might as well laugh at them. Otherwise, there will be no end to them. The person who said this in a low voice was a young mage from Jakarta. He was also the strategist for this mercenary group, but right now he could only smile wryly as he helplessly watched his boss. Meanwhile, Just, the master of unfunny jokes, apparently noticed that people didn't find his joke to be funny, so he worked his mind and came up with a brand new joke. Do you know which room is the best place to eat in at an undead's home? Yep, that place is definitely the cleanest because it's not even useful to them. The bathroom. Ha ha ha. Alright, I didn't know why he liked telling jokes about undead and bathrooms so much. However, judging by how Lilith and Harlois were both looking at him with displeasure, I knew that Just was going to suffer for what he said in the future. After all, both of them were undead that possessed the ability to eat like normal, and they probably needed to use the bathroom on occasion as well. Should I say that he deserves what he's going to get? He seemed to have noticed that nobody was laughing, so he thought things over and somehow came up with yet another joke. Right, have you heard about the story of the brave dragon-slaying warrior and the underground city? Once upon a time, there was a foolish red dragon who ate too much. This time, A certain long-haired woman ground her teeth. I finally laughed as I listened to this stale joke as I observed this master of shooting himself in the foot. Let me tell a joke as well. Once upon a time, there was an idiot who talked about slaying dragons in front of a dragon and undead toilet humor jokes in front of undead, and then, well, there's nothing else left. And right when we were about to enter the Bardi Empire, Pope Caloma's declaration against Emperor Orlos had started to spread around alike. The Lagraz kingdom's royalty were devout believers in the Holy Light, and they decided to answer the Holy Church's summons and declare war against the Bardi Empire after some hesitation. One day later, after the news spread, the Bardi Empire and Lagraz kingdom formally became countries at war. Basically, everything was unbeknownst to us while we were currently together with this merchant group from Lagraz, with the intention of entering the Bardi Empire to gather information. System reminder: relax. The master of shooting himself in the foot is a title that forever belongs to you. As another friendly reminder, you should probably go to the Fate God's Divine Temple and attempt to change your own fate. Chapter 266. Unfortunate. Should I say that I was fortunate? The Veggie Merchant Association was well known, and all the border officials recognized Cindy Veggie. We proceeded quite smoothly. Well, except for the fact that this was a time of turmoil. Border security was raised by several levels. The unfamiliar faces of the Silver Coin Squad led to some small trouble. Isn't it all because of the troublesome times we live in? I invited some extra mercenaries to help protect me. Cindy's reason sounded quite convincing, and the other two famous mercenary groups he hired lent further credence to his claim. We, however, were the unconvincing ones, as we didn't resemble mercenaries at all. We were without any reputation or combat achievements, and even our mercenary registrations had been just recently done. We definitely appeared more like spies than merchants. However, thanks to the shiny gold gifts that Cindy handed to the border guards, they pretended to not see us. The approval process would normally take a minimum of 2 or 3 days to report all goods brought into the Bardi Empire. Yet since the goods were precious seasonal wares that were vital for replenishment, the head of border security helped simplify the process as much as possible and only glanced over the goods before letting us pass through. As for me, I still had yet to realize that this was the beginning of my misfortune. As a small merchant who had successfully fooled a bigger merchant into helping smuggle me across, I was quite happy at how I made it past this difficult obstacle. Of course, I thanked the big boss for helping me out. No, I should be the one thanking you. Although you're quite young, the depth of your knowledge is amazing. I've learned so much from you these past few days. If possible, could I invite you to come join our Veggie Merchant Association? I shall personally recommend you to our leader. You should consider it more, as even a genius like you will find it difficult to start a business from scratch. Connections and capital need to be accumulated over several decades. After all, as long as you're willing to join our Veggie Merchant Association, I promise that your future job level won't be lower than mine at all. Cindy Veggie was quite sincere with his words. Everything had been abnormally quiet along the way. He didn't understand the small amount of friction between the mercenary groups, but this young man named Rolo had unimaginable ideas about the banking industry, business development, loans, and debts. And they were all theories that he had never heard about before. And, the more he thought about Rolo's theories, the better he felt that they sounded. As for the fact that he spent so much money on this trip hiring 2 mercenary groups, he felt it was all worth it with the knowledge he gained. Cindy, who treated the Veggie Merchant Association like his own family, was doing his very best to recruit a talent for his boss. I was beginning to feel awkward because I could sense the sincerity of this middle-aged merchant. I seemed to have gotten too carried away in acting the part of a merchant. In the end, I could only go along with the rumors about me and tell him that I was from a rich family, and that I was only out here to gain experience but still needed to go home in the end to take over the family business. Yep, all of that was the truth. Of course, I slightly glossed over some things, such as not telling him that the family business was a kingdom. That's such a pity. If you ever change your mind, the Veggie Merchant Association shall forever welcome you. I observed this middle-aged merchant who had such a look of regret, who could only give up in front of my sincere and polite rejection. He ended up giving me a recommendation letter to the Veggie Merchant Association that I would probably never end up using, which even caused me to feel guilt, an emotion I rarely felt. It seems that I have quite the potential as a merchant, which caused him to feel so much regret. But just as I was getting all happy, that silly cat immediately jumped out and cast a cold bucket of water upon my thoughts. Ridiculous. An expert merchant was actually fooled by a layman? Do you even know what the current price of salt is, or which trade route is the most profitable one? Theory and practice are two different things entirely. And, the most important of all, did you see how a merchant like him was talking to the border guards? Do you know how to speak so politely and give bribes like him? Alright then. Reality was quite cruel. Be polite and profit? Speak softly, smile like a merchant? I would probably just punch the border guards straight in the face instead. HMPH, you silly cat. Talking like you understand. Ridiculous. Of course I understand. Mages are a job class that uses a lot of money. How can they live if they don't understand some of the merchant business? After so many years of accumulation, I have numerous large merchant associations under my name. My income every year can support me in activating several tens of 7 Circle research projects. 7 Circle was already at the level of a legend ranked mage. Normally speaking, even a legend ranked mage could only afford to activate one research project at a time. This meant that this cat could actually afford to pay for several tens of legend ranked mages' expenses all at once. Just how rich was she? I was outright astonished to hear this. I never expected such a rich girl to be right by my side. This silly cat was actually a white, rich, and beautiful rich girl? I did some rough calculations, which told me that her income was at the minimum equal to a mid-sized city's. Please, carry me, rich girl. Please sponsor me. Please support me. Please loan me money. Please be my sugar mommy. Sure, Princess Peach. Shut up, silly cat. If you ever mention this again, I shall sell you off as a cat who can talk. Alright, after another typical battle between human and cat, I won yet another round. HMPH. Did she really think that transforming herself into a humanoid form would help her defeat me? I know how to spit. I also have longer arms and legs. And I know how to grope and pinch, cough, cough. Something like proper limits were never important during fights. Still, when I touched the lolly on her chest in the heat of chaotic battle, she really was quite flat. It even hurt to touch, she was so flat, just like an airport runway, causing me to cry in sympathy. I should prepare some extra milk for you. It even hurt my hand. It's also bad to have other people say I'm abusing my pet. Pervert, you're dead. I'm going to go all out against you. Weren't you the one who forbade me from transforming into a mature form? Dream on, silly cat. You actually want to be taller than me? Just obediently be Princess Flat, and remember to wax that airport runway chest of yours. Alright then. The second round of the human-cat battle began with this. Cough, cough. Getting back to the main topic, our fake identities became real identities thanks to Cindy's careful protection. We smuggled ourselves into the Bardi Empire quite successfully. By the time we arrived in the Bardi Empire's first border city, Raklayala town, not only did we not meet with any dangerous magical monsters, but we didn't even come across a single bandit. Phew. The domain lord here is an old friend of our Veggie Merchant Association. More than 40% of our goods are sold to him. It seems that I won't be saddled with a monetary loss this time after all. Cindy was laughing quite happily. He had already mentally prepared himself to lose money on this trip, but things were unexpectedly smooth so far. Although those undead are quite cruel, they actually made the road safer. Unlike the typical magic of mages, which required a large amount of money to fund their research, the biggest problem with undead magic research was typically the lack of materials. That was why in the past, catching undead mages typically required one to only have to guard a cemetery or a large burial site. It was even said that some high-level holy knights could even receive a cemetery guarding sponsorship fee, as they basically lived in cemeteries. And from what I learned through certain channels, the Bardi Empire actually even gave the high-level undead the status of nobles and allowed them to freely gather materials as they liked. This doubtlessly caused a huge wave in the Bardi Empire's society. In order to avoid incurring public outrage and rebellion, the undead didn't touch anything like the nobles' cemeteries as of yet. Instead, outlaws, bandits, and magical beasts on the road met with trouble. The undead volunteered as defenders of justice and wouldn't listen to any excuses. Typically, the high-level undead would then add numerous new skeleton soldiers and zombies to their subordinates after delivering a vicious beating. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when I heard this rumor. Should I say that the undead had evil intentions but did a good deed? At the very least, the bandits and other lawless individuals who didn't become research materials speedily gave up their illegal ways and vanished. Every main road soon became much more peaceful and safer. Well, it's just temporary. The material's quality directly influences the final product's quality. Commoners' bones are at the quality of being blown apart by a single gust of wind. The corpses of the strong are the real high-quality materials. In this era of strong ruling over the weak, the corpses of the strong will typically be at some respectable location, and would never be just randomly thrown into a mass burial site. For undead mages, if commoners' cemeteries are appetizers, nobles' graves are desserts. The royal mausoleums are the true feasts for them. I refuse to believe that they'll be able to stand letting such a feast pass them by. As the both of us were veteran undead mages, Harlois and I exchanged smiles of mutual understanding. It seems that you have quite a deep understanding of royal mausoleums. You've done something like this in the past? How many times? And how many times were you caught? What's the reward on your head? Ridiculous. You think that you're incredible just because you've dug up a few elven royal mausoleums before? I'm your teacher. Have you ever heard of the books that I wrote, 10 Greatest Missteps by Grave Guardians? The joy I had from stealing right under their noses, or how to analyze a noble's status and quality of materials from the emblem and design of a mausoleum. These are must-read books for any undead mage. Oh, you were the one who wrote those classics. I'm a loyal fan of yours. But, even though the book's title says 10, why did you write more than 90 and the book series still hasn't concluded yet? HMPH. How would I be able to scam more funding if I ended it just like that? Start from 10 and never finish. My goal is to reach the stars. When I finally finish, the number of chapters I have shall equal the number of stars. Doesn't that mean it'll never end? Sigh. This area of research, shamelessness, is something I'm still lacking in. If there's no more content, I just stop writing. But you must have heard of my book on practical methods, 18 Ways to Use Luoyang Shovels. I even heard that my book sold pretty well. That damned unfinished book that ended only halfway through was written by you? You even dare to brag about such a thing? I'm going to stuff you into a pit. People should look forward towards the future. It's too difficult to fill old pits, and I prefer to continually dig new ones. You really are an absolutely shameless bastard. Forget it. I shouldn't say anything about you, as that'd be the pot calling the kettle black. Let's just forget things. In some ways, Harlois and I were quite similar. We were both academic theorists. What a farce. At this moment, if you ignored the fact that I had teeth and claw marks all over my face, as well as the fact that Harlois' fake tail was snapped in two and her blonde hair was rumpled all over, we were really such a good teacher and disciple pairing that got along quite well. Knaves of a feather flocking together. Cough, cough. I should get back to the main topic again. While exclaiming at how surprisingly peaceful this trip had been so far, Cindy was going to wait here in this town for at least 2 weeks for various small merchants from other cities. Meanwhile, our goal was Port Victoria, so it was naturally time to split up. But, before I left, Cindy was actually invited by the local domain lord for a dinner party. As he wanted to help the merchant Trollo establish connections, he kindly invited me to go along with him as well. Originally, I wanted to refuse politely. Apparently, there's a major personage from the Bardi Empire's capital here, a distant relative of the Bardi royalty, who's going to attend this dinner party. If you want to do merchant business in Bardi in the future, this is a great chance for you. I didn't care one whit about merchant opportunities in Bardi, but if I could receive information about the current situation in the Bardi royalty and Bardi capital directly from a higher-ranked noble, then that was something I wanted more than anything. And, so, I agreed to go together with him, but as a result, damn it, why are these guys still chasing after us? Weren't you going to the domain lord's dinner party? Why are they all chasing after you for your head, and you even dragged us into it? I turned to look behind me. The noble's private soldiers were still on my tail, chasing me. It's a long story. On a well-lit night with a full moon and no wind, we're currently being chased, so explain it to me with only one sentence. I'm so unfortunate. Alright then, that was definitely quite a short explanation. But the grudge and deep agony contained in that sentence reverberated through all the mountains and forests. The deep emotions within could single-handedly shake the heavens and earth and cause even the gods to tremble upon hearing it. Just how pitiful and how much of a grudge was there? I'm truly so pitiful. Chapter 267, Unexpected Visitor. Racklaela town was part of Earl Samuel's domain, as well as where his main residence was located. Although he was a powerful local domain lord, Earl Samuel was going through tough times as of late. His domain didn't have any particular special products. Most industries were at only a mid or low level here. In the eyes of those nobles from more urban areas, this location was probably a classic example of a hick location. The only noteworthy part was that this was one of the reasonably well-run domains closest to the Lagraz kingdom, so the import-export trade was relatively flourishing. More than 70% of Earl Samuel's income came from taxes on the import-export trade. However, ever since last winter, due to certain unstable political factors within the Bardi Empire, the number of merchants coming from Lagraz had significantly decreased. Since this would greatly affect his tax income, it made his life rather difficult. Still, it looked like his luck was improving again. Not only did the major merchants in Devizhi come as agreed, even brilliant Pearl Carolyn A. Milan from the Bardi capital of Hazler came to visit his domain on a vacation, which was a great political opportunity for him. This Carolyn was a distant relative of the emperor and had the royal family name of Milan. Although she was only a distant relative who wasn't even in the line of succession to inherit the throne, her father Duke Harold was a major personage who even the princes had to defer to. As an infanta, one who was young, beautiful, and renowned for being wise, on top of her illustrious family name, Carolyn had many suitors within the Bardi Empire. Earl Samuel was overjoyed that such a person chose to come spend a vacation within his own domain, while also simultaneously being nervous that he would accidentally antagonize her, which would, undoubtedly, be bad for him. And so, Earl Samuel invited the best chefs and acting troops within his domain and held a major welcoming party at his residence. He invited all the nearby local nobles and leaders and even the major merchants in Devizhi from the east, which caused him to receive some criticism. In the eyes of most nobles, while they may benefit from making trades with merchants, that was something that they couldn't do on the surface. After all, that was considered a low-class activity. As for me, as an add-on to Cindy's merchant party, I was quite happy to join Earl Samuel's welcoming party. Yep, I was simply happy to be able to receive new information. It definitely wasn't me being happy at being able to eat and drink as much as I wanted for free or anything like that. Fine then, I admit that these Bardi spicy soup noodles were quite agreeable with my palate, that these freshly baked apple pies were absolutely scrumptious, and the spices on that barbecued meat were simply perfect. These fried chicken legs tasted even better, not to mention the excellent pudding and finely aged red wine. The provisions I was eating recently tasted so bland, and since I wouldn't have the chance to meet such delicious foods again, I didn't care how others were pointing and looking at me. Who cared if I was drooling or swallowing everything in a single gulp? Just call me a rural hick that had come to the city. Who cared what everyone said? Forget about reputation. Stuffing my stomach was more important. Those who saw my archmage robe and wanted to chat me up gave up instantly upon seeing the ravenous manner in which I was devouring food. Even Cindy shook his head and gave up the idea of introducing me to important personages. But, since nobody was going to come bother me, I was more than happy to enjoy such an abundant feast. It was a rare opportunity for me. I only forced myself to stop when the main character of the dinner party finally appeared. When Infanta Carolyn appeared outside the door, she attracted everyone's attention. I won't comment on how she was clad in so much jewelry. Also, since she was from a major family in the capital, her aura and appearance were both better than passable. However, since everyone politely put down what they were drinking and eating when she arrived, I could only do the same so as to not attract unwanted attention to myself. I helplessly put down the pudding cake that I was chewing. Sigh, such a grand show of etiquette just for her. Looking at her family crest, she really is an infant? I'd already seen so many beauties already. Don't even mention an infanta, even princesses were common in my eyes. However, the servant that followed after her astonished me quite greatly, an actual lich. Perhaps other people didn't know how to differentiate between skeleton mages, skeleton soldiers, and mages, but for me, the soul fire of liches was akin to a bright light in the middle of the night, easy to identify. This is Lord Rex. He's an imperial envoy on a tour of inspection by orders of Emperor Orlos. He represents the will of Emperor Orlos. Alright then, did I accidentally transmigrate into a fairy tale now? Using a lich as an imperial envoy for a tour of inspection? Was I going crazy? Or was Orlos the crazy one? But representing the will of the emperor meant that he had an incredibly venerated status. Not to mention that there was someone as high ranked as an infanta doing the introductions for him. Plus, there were plenty of recent rumors about undead receiving noble titles, so even the blind or young brats would know what they should do in such a situation. Not to mention these local nobles that had survived the stage of politics for so long already. There was an endless amount of applause and cheering. The local domain Lord Earl Samuel was the first to show his welcoming appreciation, and all of the nobles kept bootlicking and kissing ass. There were even some young and beautiful women that cast seductive looks at the lich out of habit, but they soon discovered that there was something wrong about the situation. The lich seemed to be looking at them with an expression that said, "Are you joking with me?" Which caused these young ladies to hurriedly lower their heads in an effort to decrease their sense of presence. As for me, when I heard that a lich actually became an imperial envoy representing the will of the emperor, I was so shocked that I almost choked. I hurriedly drank 2 gulps of some 200-year-old domed red wine to swallow down my surprise. Only later did I find out that this was all part of the undead emperor's plan. In order to completely take over the Bardi Empire, they made their plan with centuries as the time unit. And now, it was time for them to plant the seeds for harvesting. In order to solidify their authority, having a high-ranked noble from the capital taking a high-level undead around on a tour of inspection and establishing the undead's authority was just part of their overall plan. See, even major nobles from the capital are recognizing high-level undead as high-ranked nobles. What are you all worried about? This was probably what the undead emperors wanted and were hoping for, to mitigate humanity's distaste for having undead rulers above them in order to avoid any unplanned accidents when they put their plan into motion. However, their plan was still limited and with flaws. With Emperor Orlos ruling with an iron grip, it was possible for people to accept some undead as nobles, but if they discovered that the entirety of the Bardi Empire was ruled by undead, this country would likely come to its end. Perhaps, it was precisely because the Holy Church learned about this that they made the decision to eliminate the sources of evil here. Still, the undead were probably just looking to temporarily coax human worries. As for whether or not they'd be exposed later, when the undead emperors all descended, they wouldn't really care if they were exposed anymore. If this main character arriving for the dinner party could be considered just the first program for tonight, then, when the infanta that just arrived from the capital started whispering in Earl Samuel's ear and pointing at Cindy, I faintly perceived that the god of misfortune was giving me his blessings once again. Pope. Heretic. Battle. Enemy country. Capture them. Take their riches. Thanks to my 20 points in legend ranked perception ability, my 5 senses were far above an ordinary person's. I heard these few words through the stubborn winds, and when I saw Earl Samuel's expression change from disbelief and astonishment to one of consideration and then great joy, I knew what I should do next. Damn it, this is going to be really fun now. Perhaps I really should go to the God of Fate's sanctuary and pray to him. But, I was already too late. Guards, capture those spies. It would seem that Earl Samuel had already finished thinking over things and come to a conclusion. Actually, he didn't need to hesitate at all. Since the Bardi Empire and Lagraz Kingdom were now officially at war, he probably couldn't expect any more merchants coming over from Lagraz for at least the next several years. In that case, he might as well just take all of the Lagraz merchant Cindy's goods for himself, which was a concrete way of enriching himself. As for the reason for taking all of Cindy's goods for himself, with the 2 countries at war, doesn't that obviously make you a spy? I'm going to take everything you have, and as for you, if someone pays a ransom for you I'll let you go, otherwise you can just rot in jail here. What if the two countries later improved their relationship? That would be no problem either. Would these foreign merchants really have the ability to take revenge? There would always be new fat lambs arriving for the slaughter. And besides, it was still possible to work together if Cindy was able to pay a sufficient amount of ransom money. Not only did Earl Samuel come to such a realization at this moment, but Cindy was no idiot either. He had already expected something like this to possibly occur due to the unstable political situation. The moment he heard the word spies, he unhesitatingly took a scroll out from his sleeve and tore it. A 5-circle magic random dimensional door appeared. Since it was too quick and too unexpected, even the Lich Rex was unable to stop him. Cindy was randomly teleported to a location within a 3-kilometer radius. It would seem that this was his ace card for escaping, and he had been prepared to use it at a moment's notice. Wow, Mr. Cindy, aren't you forgetting about someone? Don't just make your teammates suffer like this. Several dozen pairs of eyes were staring at me. Since the main character Cindy had ran away, I, who was only a side character, had obviously leveled up. If I say that I'm not together with him, will you believe me? Catch that guy. Yep, that's how everything happened. That's why you unhesitatingly brought all the soldiers chasing after you over to us? Aren't you the one that's making your teammates suffer? A certain silly cat was angrily shouting at me as we hid in a small forest. She was quite angry because she had just lost her collectibles. Isn't he just a mere lich? Why don't you just kill him? Do you really need to run like this? Do you think that it'll end with just a lich? There will probably be something even more troublesome after him. Besides, I'm currently only a gold rank. Do you think it's possible for me to defeat a legend rank lich together with a bunch of small fries? Do you really dare to tell me that you honestly believe that? You can't even defeat a lich? At the very weakest, all liches would be legend ranked. But judging from his mana waves and soul fire's strength, the Lich Rex was only at the top of legend rank. And he was even a legend rank who lacked foundational strength because he had been forcibly improved in power by an outside force. Although undead over the legend rank boundary that possessed intelligence were typically stronger than humans at the same power rank, based on my understanding of undead magic, normal legend rank liches weren't all that difficult to deal with. Especially all the more so because I could tell that the Lich Rex seemed to be an ice magic specialist apart from using undead magic. That would be nothing more than showing off in front of an expert, and as Harlois said, it would be quite easy for me to deal with him. However, I didn't do so because I had other considerations. The soldiers chasing after us were mostly the Domain Lord's private soldiers, and most of them were iron-ranked novices. If we really wanted to turn around and counterattack, literally any one of us could do the task on their own. However, I forced everyone in my squad to listen to me, ordering them not to scare them off. But the pity was that although I preferred to simply run off and come to a peaceful solution, they seemed to be quite stubborn about following us. Thanks to there being local residents supplying them with information in this environment filled with enemies, they were quickly able to catch up to us again. Catch that mage, otherwise our lord will kill us all. Bastard, is that guy really a mage? Why is he so good at running? Don't mention it anymore. Asan was sent flying with a single smack of his mage staff and was even stuck into the wall. This guy definitely has an ogre's bloodline. Hurry up and chase after him. This time, our lord is so angry. If we can't catch him, none of us will get off easy. As we heard the soldiers saying such things from behind us, Little Red, who had been rather frustrated at not being able to vent, looked at me in astonishment, seeming to question what it was that I had done. Not much. Since I wasn't using a show of force to escape, I used a hostage, that Domain Lord. Instead, that Domain Lord probably felt like he lost a lot of face in front of that beautiful Infanta, so he got angry. I think that there was something wrong with the way you took a hostage. First of all, you should have used a knife, not a chicken leg, when putting something against someone else's neck. Not only that, after you noticed that you grabbed the wrong item, 2 wrongs don't make a right, you actually finished eating that chicken leg and used the chicken bone to point at everyone, shouting, "Don't come over, otherwise I'm going to stab your Domain Lord to death with this chicken bone." An earl that was almost stabbed to death with a chicken bone? I think that once this news spreads, he would prefer to have been stabbed to death by you. Having a magical pet that was connected to your mind was truly inconvenient. This was especially because she would take every opportunity she could get to make fun of me. Did she really think that I didn't want to use a dining knife instead? Who knew that I would accidentally grab the wrong item? That's right, not only that, Roland even thought that the Earl was being noisy, so he used pudding too. Grrgh. I unhesitatingly stuffed the final chicken leg I had been saving for myself into that silly cat's mouth, finally giving myself some peace and quiet. If I'm correct in my calculations, this could even be a good opportunity. Yep, let's go meet back up with Cindy again. I still need to recover my fees for mental trauma. Stop changing the topic. We want to hear more. Just how did you escape using a chicken leg? Stop mentioning chicken legs. What about the pudding, then? Note 1. An infanta is a historical term that refers to a daughter of the ruling monarch of Spain or Portugal, especially the eldest daughter who was not heir to the throne. Chapter 268, The Past and a Plan. Although the soldiers chasing after us worked quite hard, they were obviously destined to receive nothing for their efforts. Meanwhile, I was mainly focusing on how to calm down a certain dragon's anger rather than on how to find a path of escape. Otherwise, I'd be cleaning up piles of ashes. Little Red's black hair was beginning to turn red, and her black eyes were turning red as well. It was quite evident that she was furious. If I didn't do a good job here, perhaps she'd be breathing dragon breath the very next second. Hey, Little Red, when we were adventuring together back in the day, I never knew you had such a bad temper. Weren't we all used to being chased like this? Ridiculous. Back in the day, that was because we weren't strong enough to win. If we didn't run, we supposed to wait around and let them kill us? It's all your fault for being a professional at shooting yourself in the foot, always antagonizing those stronger than us. Besides, did you really have such a good temper in the past? You would always get angry at being chased and you would never care about who you antagonized regardless of their strength. But have we ever had a similar experience like now where we're being chased around by those much weaker than us? They're even insulting us so viciously. I tried recalling to the best of my memory. For the sake of my reputation, of course I should shout, how could we possibly have such a humiliating experience? For glory and honor, we should turn around and fight to our fullest. But when I thought of how a certain silly cat always peeped on my thoughts and made a career out of going against me, I could only honestly shake my head. Actually, there were quite a lot of times that we ran from those weaker than us, usually when we were the ones lacking logic and reason. For example, whenever you dined and dashed or drank and dashed, whenever Adam did something stupid or owed a debt or had something to do with women, and Lisa was basically an expert at stealing things, we were all equally skilled in attracting aggro. Glare. 1. Alright then. Before I could finish my sentence, Little Red covered my mouth. Her fiery eyes transformed back into black eyes once more, and she had the rare expression of panic on her face. It would seem that when faced with her dark history, she was unable to get angry anymore. Ha ha ha. You forgot about how Margaret was scamming magical knowledge from other mages and getting into trouble with her experimental magic. Actually, everyone was roughly the same. After all these years, why talk about such matters anymore? Let's just forget about the past. I would have forgotten about it if you didn't mention it. I think that you were all novices back then, which made me suffer so pitifully. I was basically both the nanny and the daddy for all of you, on top of you all having such strong personalities. None of you ever listened to me. Things weren't easy for me. Everyone was looking at us in astonishment and disbelief with expressions that said so. Even the great ones had days such as these. This actually caused Little Red's face to redden in embarrassment. It would appear that even a huge ancient dragon like her could only surrender to her own dark history. Don't mention it. Now I'm beginning to remember as well. There were so many problems with where we went adventuring. A casual adventure where you said we'd just go wherever the road took us would on average cause us to meet 3 legends and 1 saint per month. And we would always somehow arrive in every species' forbidden grounds and secret hideouts. Do you dare to say that there weren't problems with your leadership for our adventuring team? Of course there were problems. Where else was I supposed to find teammates that were so strong and so easy to fool? Naturally, I took my strong teammates to chase after any clue I could for revenge. Forbidden grounds, secret hideouts, royal palaces. In front of the famous detective Rollo Charname, two and his strong companions, that was nothing. HMPH. If it wasn't for me carefully picking our adventuring paths, how could you all possibly become so strong? If it wasn't for those difficult battles back then, how could you grow so powerful? It would probably take you an extra 500 years to reach Molly's level. When Little Red heard this and recalled those youthful days of hers that were filled with blood and sweat, Little Red, who wasn't afraid of anything, actually broke out into a cold sweat. It took her quite a while to speak up again. If I could choose, I'd rather wait an extra 500 years. You bastard. This basically means you're finally admitting that you chose all those difficult adventuring paths for us on purpose. Before, you wouldn't admit it no matter how much you were beaten up. TSK. You don't understand that it was for your own good. I had to guarantee that you all could grow through life and death battles but also not make the battles so difficult that we'd definitely die. Did you really think it was that easy for me? You're even making it sound reasonable that you made others suffer. Girls should pay more attention to their words and not use words that are censored so often. Fine then, tomboys need to pay attention as well. You don't hit my face. Alright then, I wasn't making things up. Actually, it was largely with the assistance of my system that I was able to do so many ridiculous things in the past. Things that had also helped Adam and the others to grow in power so quickly. Main characters adventuring squad mode. You are the main character from Legends. You and your adventuring team will continuously attract endless amounts of trouble, and experiencing all this trouble will lead to plenty of opportunities for growth. As long as you're able to survive, your party's rate of growth will be cheat-like. System reminder, although you're the main character, you don't have the plot armor to never die like most main characters. System, can I exchange for another one of those? The basic rules are that anything you've already exchanged for before can't be exchanged for again. System reminder, all our products are unique and custom made by hand. And once they're sold, no refunds. We even deliver. Remember to give us a 5-star review. Sigh, such a pity. It would have been so convenient to have another one of these to train the novices. We'd just have to go out for a little trip, and if they didn't die, they'd each immediately be powerful enough to go out on their own. Well, even if I could obtain such a mode again, it wouldn't be all that meaningful. After all, I have too many enemies, and strengthening just a few of my allies won't amount to much. I'm just going to have to patiently wait for the elemental tide. I can't exactly improve the overall combat strength of the entire mortal plane. Wait a moment, even without the system's cheats helping me, it's not impossible for me to do some things to improve their power levels. I faintly noticed something, but now obviously wasn't a convenient time to be thinking about such things. There were still soldiers chasing after us. Where were the soldiers? Where'd they go? Couldn't they work a little harder? I was still running. The soldiers chasing after us? The last soldier chasing after us ran out of breath 3 hills ago. He's probably still panting, collapsed on the ground. TSK, TSK, TSK. How pitiful. An iron-ranked novice ran more than 30 kilometers after you in one go. He's probably coughing out his lungs right now. Right, you probably ran an extra 10 or so kilometers without needing to. At the very beginning of us making our escape, the silly cat was shouting about how her legs were short and she wasn't fast as running, so she turned herself into her cat form and took a nap on my head. But now, she had come out again to laugh at my misfortune. I widened my mouth in surprise. I had accidentally had too much fun while running and forgot about the soldiers chasing after me. It would seem that there was now yet another new piece of dark history for me. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Who would dare to stop if you didn't stop? As for interrupting you, seeing how you and Lady Little Red were having so much fun chatting about the past. Alright. Why don't you just directly say that you wanted to listen in on some gossip? HMPH. Talking in such a roundabout fashion. Cough. Our next target is to meet up with Cindy's merchant group again. They actually instantly all ran off. Damn it, they dared to make me suffer like this. DSK, he's changing the topic. Yep, he's changing the topic. Little Cohen, make sure that you don't grow up to be an adult like Roland. The ranger job class would typically be the best at tracking others. After all, They had both the tracking abilities of hunters as well as the knowledge of how to cast some nature magic. However, the pity was that our ranger, Little Red, was obviously unreliable. If I wanted her to track something, the result would probably be that she would transform into her dragon form and search from the sky above. If Little Red had been a gold or silver dragon, this wouldn't have been a big problem. It would only be at the extent of some headline news, but Little Red just happened to be a red dragon. As an exiled evil dragon, it's understandable to have an absolutely terrible reputation. Fire-type huge dragons love to destroy cities as well as kill humans and set fires. That's very normal. But this isn't the underground world. If an ancient red dragon appeared on the surface, probably even the dragon city on the surface would take notice. The underground world practically consisted of various species exiled from the surface. And I probably don't need to go into how deep the grudges between the exiled and those that exiled them would be. The beastmen exiled the underground beastmen, but since both groups ended up in such a pitiful state, they barely decided to forget about things in the end. The elves exiled the dark elves, and as for their relationship, fine then. The Dark Elves had been wanting to kill the elves for countless years. The moment they returned to the surface, the first thing they did was to attack the elves. After all, for the long-lived to remember a grudge, it shouldn't be called petty, it should be called an excellent memory. Ding. Please accept your new title, Roland, the one with such an excellent memory. Cough. I decided to directly ignore my system's comment. Who cared if I simply had a good memory? Actually, although people said elves were petty, dragons were even more so. They would often take revenge about some incident from several hundred years ago on their target's descendants, and the worst part was that they typically didn't treat any other species as equal to them. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many dragon slaying incidents, either. The current generation belonged to the humans. The dragons of the surface weren't as strong as in the past, and some dragon cities were basically empty shells. But if a large-scale number of underground dragons appeared on the surface, who knew how the surface dragons and dragon cities would react? And it would still be alright if she was some other red dragon, but Little Red just happened to be the dragon queen of the underground. Her identity was quite sensitive. If her identity was exposed, I really didn't want to see a huge war between dragons break out. Wait for the other underground species to come to the surface first and see how the surface dragons react. Right now, having the young black and red dragons serve the East Mist communal country is also a way of seeing what will happen. That was why I had Little Red make a promise to me before we left that she wouldn't transform into her dragon form unless it was absolutely required. Of course, this also limited Little Red's power level. But I wasn't at all worried that we wouldn't be able to find Cindy's merchant group even if she couldn't help us find them. They're in a small forest that's 40 kilometers southwest of here. This was a magical marking that I had Harloy's leave on them. No matter how good we got along, it would always be necessary to take certain actions in secret. Southwest, you say? Eagle Storm lifted his wooden staff and cast a spell that caused a bright green magical light to gather in his eyes. The next moment, his eyes returned to normal. Yep, I found them. The forest told me that there's roughly 60 of them. They're densely packed, but the life forces coming from them are quite strong. None of them are injured. Their cargo and carriages are with them as well. It seems they were prepared beforehand after all. In the forest, Druid's forest magic would help them to have countless allies. As long as a Druid was able to determine the approximate location beforehand, any Archdruid would have countless ways of seeing anything that happened in a forest. Of course, even if they weren't hiding in a forest, we still had another professional tracker with us. Judging by how Bai Feng was looking southwest to begin with, he had been prepared already as well. Relax, we can't possibly lose them. Amir and Daisy have been informing me of their movements. Who are Amir and Daisy? I got a little curious at hearing these names I'd never heard before. Daisy is that Cindy's horse, while Amir is the leader of the other cargo horses. They're husband and wife and have a pretty good relationship with me. Alright then, there was far too much information for me to digest here. I really shouldn't have asked. Judging from the merchant group's complete preparations, the Vegi Merchant Association must have been prepared to take such measures long ago. They immediately left the moment they received a signal from Cindy. Although I could understand why they would leave without telling us a single word since we had known each other for too short a time, nor were we true allies, but being sold out like this still made me rather dissatisfied. And judging by how they all escaped so quickly, perhaps they had all been waiting for such a scenario just in case while Cindy and I were at the party, prepared to escape at a moment's notice. We were probably the only ones that weren't notified, as we had only joined midway. Should I say that it's to be expected of a merchant who only cares about benefits? Although I completely understand, it's still a little rude of him. And a little more than an hour later, when we appeared in front of Cindy and his merchant group, they were both quite astonished and feeling somewhat awkward. Things were too sudden. However, I immediately interrupted his explanation. Relax, we're not here to look for trouble. I have a little plan that might be of assistance in this current situation. Note 1. For those who don't know, aggro is a game term that means you instantly attract hostility from all sorts of NPCs and monsters when you go out. Basically, attracting aggro means you're well hated. 2. Char name is a Baldur's Gate reference. Chapter 269, Disguise. The first rays of sunshine illuminated the streets, signifying the arrival of a new day. It was already time to get up out of bed. Yet Carolyn continued to bury her head under her pillow, apparently trying her best to pretend to be a turtle and laze about in bed. I don't want to get up, I don't want to get up. That way, that annoying pile of bones won't come looking for me. Her overly mature appearance and calmly indifferent aura always caused people to forget about Carolyn's real age. She was still quite young. Since she was born in a high and noble family, she had always had to meet the high requirements expected of her, which was why she seemed to be so mature when dealing with others. However, since she grew up as an isolated bird in a gilded cage, she was actually quite a simple person. Her favorite hobbies were sewing and reading popular stories about knights. She would cry at parts she was allured by and would pull all-nighters finishing her favorite novels. She was basically no different from an ordinary girl in these aspects. As for her good social etiquette and conversational skills, that was all thanks to her very hard-working personal tutors. If Carolyn was allowed to do as she pleased, she probably would have acted just like the female leads in certain knight stories and rushed out for an adventure. But this time, as the daughter of a duke, her father gave her quite a difficult task. Carolyn, you've probably heard about it as well. The Bardi Empire's higher-ups want to improve our relationship with the undead. This is the will of the Emperor. This time, you have been selected to take the Lich on a tour of inspection as an imperial envoy. You have to both help the nobles to establish a good relationship with the undead but also not make the local nobles lose too much face. After all, those that join too early will have a bad reputation. Simply speaking, she was requested to carefully control the situation. She had to improve the noble's relationship with this Lich but also not act too much like a sycophant towards the Lich in front of the other human nobles. Originally, as the eldest daughter of a noble family, this level of a political task should have been easy for her. Her personal tutor had long since taught her all types of necessary political skills. However, when she began taking on this task, she discovered that it was much more difficult than she expected. I've heard that the Elisai red wine here is quite famous. Translation of how nobles always speak in roundabout fashion: you haven't eaten lunch yet, right? How about having a drink in a bit? Alright then. When the Lich's skeletal head stared at her quietly, soul fire burning within, even Carolyn knew that she had made a mistake with her words. However, she was rather dense and not the type to easily give up. I've heard that the master tailor Cockerant's new creations are quite creative, and have received excellent reviews even in the capital. I also heard that he happens to be here in this area right now doing business. Translation of noble speak: your clothes are so old and tattered. How about I accompany you to buy some new clothes? The Lich looked at his own gray-colored mage robe. This seemingly old and tattered mage robe was enchanted with 5 different commonly used defensive magics and was incredibly useful. It was also an old companion of his that had been with him for more than a century. Was there really a master enchanter here that could create something better? But he felt that he should be polite towards a female's invitation, especially since Carolyn was his companion. He also felt that it would be an excellent opportunity to take a look at the works of human master enchanters, so Rex was actually slightly looking forward to this as he readily agreed. But the developments that happened afterward make Carolyn feel quite awkward. In the city of Anningdon's most flourishing business district, The Lich's hoarse soul voice was loudly shouting. Apart from glowing and self-cleaning, there are no magical defensive effects whatsoever. What garbage enchantments are these? Plus, look at the low quality of these materials. They haven't even been enhanced or had armor added in. When everyone looked at them in astonishment, Carolyn, who was with Rex, really wanted to go hide herself in a hole. Still, Carolyn didn't give up. And, so, there were many similar such occurrences. Have you heard about Andia Gyre's affair? It's really interesting, she and her uncle actually. Rex's cyan-colored soul fire kept staring at her. This girl was quite imaginative to try chatting with a Lich about gossip regarding humans having extramarital affairs. On the day after tomorrow, there's a charity event. Okay, I got it, I'll leave now and stop bothering you during your research. The soul fire that had turned blue was already the best explanation. Even Rex was getting tired of her having a Lich go to an orphanage for a charity drive. Was this supposed to be a Halloween event? What type of lame joke was this supposed to be? Rex was utterly uninterested in chatting about relationships between humans. He was a lot more interested in the topic of how to turn the living into the dead. What about perverted jokes and gossip? Although, in a way, this was an ultimate technique that Carolyn had up her sleeve to break conventions or an awkward atmosphere with anyone. Wouldn't it just be a type of sarcasm for a Lich who had nothing but bones left? Discuss the international situation or religious beliefs? Are you really sure that you want to shout for the holy light in front of a Lich? She wasn't that suicidal. And as for international situations, Lich Rex's memories were all from 3 centuries ago. She would probably have to start from a period long in the Bardi Empire's past. As the ultimate evolution of Oticus, even if Liches were always the classical antagonist in every story, the story's plot would always be about how some adventuring team ran across a Lich's ancient castle, mage tower, abandoned library. Liches were a classical example of a guardian boss that would never take action or go outside on their own. In a way, this confirmed one of the biggest characteristics of Liches. They wouldn't go outside even if you beat them up, and would want to stay inside forever. And, from a certain standpoint, the Infanta who was in the prime of her youth at 17 years old was yet another white, rich, and beautiful popular winner in life, someone who had quite a fulfilling life and was very popular. It would obviously be quite difficult for her to communicate with a Lich who was the ultimate evolution of an otaku using normal communication methods. Of course, communication wasn't impossible. As long as one used topics a Lich was interested in, even a research-loving otaku would become extremely talkative. But, as for the topics that Liches were interested in, fundamentals of undead magic research, how to use void energy to vook squirrels, which is better for creating a zombie, a Tauren's heart or a Tigerman's heart, Carolyn was probably destined to never learn such skills. We should look forward to the future as there's a bright new sun every day. Dark history. Carolyn kept attempting to communicate with Rex and adding new pages of embarrassing dark history. She became so annoying to Rex that he was unable to stand her anymore. If he took this for any longer, he might even take the brunt of his superior's anger and turn her into a zombie with no more intelligence. After the frightening night Carolyn experienced yesterday, she learned so much. First, she witnessed a young seeming mage knock away the Lich Rex with his mage staff while shouting hit. And then he took Earl Samuel hostage with a chicken leg, then he even smeared pudding all over a Death Knight's face, escaping in the chaos he created. Carolyn did her best to control the situation and kept scolding those idiots who dared to make fun of the Lich in secret, but when she returned to her room, she kept laughing for half the entire night. However, she was now forced to face reality. As I recall, that Lich is right in the next room over and I've heard that they have extremely sharp senses. Did I make another mistake without realizing it? I don't want to get out of bed. The only part where Carolyn felt slightly reassured about was that Rex seemed to have a good temper. At the very least, he didn't get angry to the point of killing her off instantly with a flick of his little finger. The sun was fully up now, and she knew that she would probably have to deal with a furious Lich who had lost face yesterday night. If she made a fool out of herself yet again, perhaps that greenish-blue soul fire of his would truly explode. Sigh, I really don't want to go. But she had no choice. Her schedule for this trip was tightly packed. After staying here for a little while, She was soon supposed to go to the nearby Baron Matt's domain. She had to discuss the plans for today's travels with the Lich and leave as early as possible. But, when Carolyn finished washing up and doing her makeup, the first scene that she saw when she opened her room's door gave quite the shock to her sense of logic and reason. In the hallway, that Lich she viewed as all-powerful had been torn to pieces. The young mage she saw just yesterday was holding onto the Lich's skeletal head, pouring holy silver and holy water into it and shaking it about as if it were dice. He then even used the Lich's arm bone to reach inside and stir things up. Why did she know that it was the Lich? The Lich Rex's epic ranked death gravestone robe was still on its body, and that familiar soul fire was almost extinguished within the skeletal head. Are you going to tell me everything? If you don't, I'm going to use your head as a chamber pot. Yep, I'll call it Galton's, Rex's head. Are you afraid? 1. Slam. Carolyn hurriedly slammed her door, thinking that she must have opened it in a wrong fashion this morning. After a long while, she slowly opened it up a crack. But just when she reached out her head, she saw that the soul fire within Rex's head as well as the blonde mage were both looking at her. The blonde mage suddenly laughed, apparently coming to a sudden realization. Forget it. It doesn't matter if you don't tell me anything. I have an even better target to ask now. The young blonde mage tossed away Galton's, Rex's head and smiled at her as he randomly picked up a rib bone. Don't close your door anymore. You didn't open it in a wrong fashion today. Yep, be more serious. Stop laughing. We're kidnapping you. Stop looking down on this Lich's bone. Be careful that I'll touch you with a Lich's grasp. Relax. We're not here to look for trouble. I have a little plan that might be of assistance in this current situation. Let's turn back time to midnight. In Cindy's temporary campgrounds, when the young man before him said that he had a plan that could take care of everything, nobody really believed him. After all, the current situation was quite obvious already. The Vegi Merchant Association had obtained through its intelligence channels that the Lagraz Kingdom and Bardi Empire were now formally at war. This was far worse than the worst outcome that the Vegi Merchant Association had been expecting. What I originally thought was that we would meet with some black-hearted domain lord that wanted too much of a kickback, or that we'd run into an undead army. In that case, I'd just have to hire extra guards, and we'd all be able to escape with no problems. But now, the two countries are actually at war. The moment the Lagraz Kingdom declared war against the Bardi Empire, it gave a huge amount of trouble to all Lagraz citizens currently within the Bardi Empire. They naturally found themselves within an enemy country. While it may sound cool to fight while surrounded on all sides, it definitely wouldn't be any fun whatsoever when even the street side vendors and little snot-nosed brats viewed you as a mortal enemy. And, the most troublesome part of all was that the enemies were no longer disorganized bandits but an entire empire's elite military forces. It was especially so when you consider the fact that strong countries' border forces would always be their best elites. Even crossing the border became an insurmountable obstacle. I casually spread out a map and pointed at a location south of us. This location was the ASA Canyon that we had passed through, which was also the largest location at which one could pass between the two countries. Of course, this location also had Fort Haslaven, which belonged to the Bardi Empire. On our way here, we had passed through easily, even with someone with such a suspicious identity like me. All it took was a little bribing, as the Vegi Merchant Association already had a good relationship with the border guards to begin with. But if we took that same road back, it would probably be filled with peril. Taking a few bribes and turning a blind eye to a few illegal merchants during peacetime was an entirely different matter to allowing foreign merchants from an enemy country to pass through during wartime. The former was unanimously understood as a way to make extra money, while the latter was likely to get people labeled as traitors to the country. After all, nobody would be able to guarantee that there weren't spies or intelligence division members within this merchant group. If we still foolishly contacted that border guard captain who helped us out earlier, then perhaps he would be the first to prepare for our executions. No matter how much gold there was to be offered to him, he still needed to be alive to enjoy it. He would probably be the first to try and erase all connections he had with us. Going back is definitely impossible. But the situation is the same if you go to any other part of the Bardi Empire's border. Of course, there are some places on the border that are undefended, but those are highly dangerous areas or filled with either natural obstacles. For example, The fantasy forest is rumored to be the home of black fairies. I believe that none of you are foolish enough to gamble on passing through it. No, with your equipment and power levels, entering such a mega dangerous area isn't even a gamble. It's simply suicide. Although none of them answered me, judging by their awkward silence, the astonishment that they were unable to hide, and the muffled sounds of discussion amongst themselves, I had been on the mark. In that case, it's quite easy. There are basically two choices left. Either you try and get past the border at some other location, reach another country, and then think of a method to return to Lagraz, or you just hide out in some mountain, village, or forest and wait for the situation to change. Yet the only possibility for you is the more passive option. You all can only choose the second one. Even Cindy was unable to hide his astonishment when he heard this. Everything had happened so suddenly, and he had just received the intelligence report about it. He hadn't even come to a final decision when I already saw through his dilemma. It's actually easy to guess why. It's quite simple, since the former plan has greater risk to it. If you want to reach another country's border, you'll have to move around within the Bardi Empire. In this situation where the Bardi Empire is now on high alert, every location will be guarded heavily, and roaming around in an enemy country without sufficient information as backup is far too risky. If you're caught by any military squad, that'll basically be the end of you. But if this method is unusable, none of you will probably be able to return home anytime soon. Everyone fell into an awkward silence. They had all realized this, but none of them had been willing to mention it. But have you thought about it? Finding a place to hide out and observe the situation may appear safer, but it's actually the most dangerous method of all. As a mega empire, do you really believe that the Bardi Empire won't have that level of control over its own lands? And the Bardi Empire is quite famous even with other countries for having an outstanding intelligence division. You can hide. But how long do you think you can hide for? The worst mistake that you made was that you're still thinking of protecting your cargo. You actually dared to run together with your cargo? Do you think that local domain Lord Earl Samuel will let go of a fat lamb like you guys? I saw that they were obviously shaken, so of course I took advantage of this and made my case. No, he definitely wouldn't. Based on my understanding of greedy nobles, he'll definitely come hunting you guys down like a rabid dog, and he'll claim all your cargo for himself. After that, he'll send in all of your heads as spies and claim his reward. And based on the current situation, he probably doesn't even need to contact the Empire's higher-ups for assistance from professional spies. All he has to do is follow your merchant group's carriage tracks. Perhaps they're already on the way as we speak. I intentionally paused for a moment here. As I expected, everyone looked in Cindy's direction, and it was quite evident that they were dissatisfied and angry. As a merchant, Cindy's insistence on taking the cargo while escaping already made the mercenaries rather displeased. But the person paying them was the boss, and unless they were forced to the brink, the mercenaries didn't want to disobey their employer's command. That would ruin their reputation, which was ever so difficult to accumulate. Yet nobody was an idiot here. These details weren't difficult to think of. It was just that the situation was too sudden, and there had been too little time for them to consider things, which was why they had been so careless. Even if I didn't mention this little detail, someone probably would have thought of it soon enough. At such a time, there would definitely be a conflict between the mercenaries and the merchant Cindy. No matter if Cindy decided to throw away his cargo or if the mercenaries decided to gamble on being able to protect Cindy, there would definitely be seeds of discontent sowed between the parties in the end. That's why I'm saying that if I have a method that can both protect your cargo and safely help you leave the Bardi Empire, will you all listen to me? Well, I'm going to end this reminiscing of mine for now. I had succeeded in convincing them all. After just showing off a slight portion of my true power, the mercenaries unhesitatingly decided to follow my command. And now, our first step was to eliminate the threat right in front of us before directly beginning a counterattack. Perhaps Earl Samuel would never even dream that the merchant group his soldiers had been chasing down all last night would come back and attack him the very next day. An epic ranked mage robe? Oh my, it's even enchanted with iron skin magic and dimensional door. Little Lich, while your power level isn't much, this is really nice equipment you have here. I tried putting on Rex's mage robe as I adjusted the time distortion ring on my finger. I changed myself from a youth to middle-aged, from middle-aged to elderly, And then from elderly too. After death. Yep, although this ring was able to change my physical appearance on the outside, it couldn't change what I actually was. I was still someone living, but I now appeared to be nothing but bones that contained rotting flesh. I ended up with the appearance of a moving skeleton. What slightly surprised me was that the little girl Carolyn watched the entire scene of a living person turning into the undead, a scene that should appear rather frightening, yet not only did she not get scared to the point of peeing in her pants, but she was actually quite excited. It was as if she was delighted to meet with such a major incident. Are you going to disguise yourself as Lord Rex? Is it just like the situation in the Night Story Masked Knights? But, you don't have soul fire or death magic, so wouldn't it be quite easy to see through you? What a strange little girl you are. Come, take another look. I concentrated and lit up the fires within my eyes, which burned with the cyan green color of soul fire. My right hand, which appeared only to be a skeleton's hand, snapped its fingers, causing countless skeletons to appear, shrouded in black mist. I laughed as I enveloped myself in a thick amount of death magic. Waves of ice also started dancing between my fingers. The real Lich who was floating in midair began roaring soundlessly at me. My disguise resembled a great Lich more than Rex himself now. It's so interesting. I meant this is so evil. Although I don't know how you did it, your disguise is basically perfect. It'll definitely succeed. What do you intend to do next? Threaten me to listen to your orders and help you in pulling the wool over everyone's eyes? I need to inform you first that I won't give in so easily. I don't care no matter what you do to my body, but as long as you threaten my family, I'll instantly surrender. I was rendered speechless. Did she mean that I didn't need to do anything to her other than verbally threaten her a little? She even volunteered how to make her surrender? What type of hostage was she supposed to be? Relax, we have a better choice than you. From today onwards, she's going to be Carolyn A. Milan. A female walked out of the shadows. She, too, had light green hair, the characteristic of the Bardi Milan royal family. Her face even resembled Carolyn to a degree of 70%. Even if you really look like me, that still won't be good enough. I have a secret treasure of the royalty which the emperor gave to me. Only the Milan bloodline can make it glow. Why is it glowing even brighter than when I hold onto it? Carolyn's necklace was stolen out of her hands by the other woman and was currently glowing brightly, as if it was a god equipment that had met its true master. Only when Lilith Milan carefully put that necklace on her neck did the pearl necklace slowly reduce its glow. If you don't finish the process of kidnapping me properly, and if you don't even try threatening me, I definitely won't tell you anything that you want to know. Just as I was now 100% certain that something was wrong with this little girl's head, Lilith suddenly revealed a dangerous-seeming smile filled with an evil allure as she approached closer. Rest assured, you shall tell me everything. Her slender fingers were already beginning to take off Carolyn's clothing, as her red lips and sweet tongue were reaching for Carolyn's shoulders and neck. Meanwhile, Lilith's other hand was already sliding towards somewhere even lower, to a place that shall not be named. What are you doing? This is totally different from the stories. How improper. You can change to someone else. Aren't I asking you right now? I'm asking your body. Not bad. It's unexpectedly tasty. I truly met a rare one, here. My lord, although I don't object to you watching me dine here, nor do I object if you're interested in joining in, aren't you worried about Lady Harloy's reporting about this to Lady Eliza? Alright then, I was filled with regret. I had almost asked, can I really join in? But I was being glared at with an expression that said, you're in the way. It was evident that her invitation was nothing more than just a joke. Although I really regretted not being able to watch the show that would come next, I could only helplessly pick up Rex's head as I left. The heart-itching moans that came from behind me were so difficult for me to forget. HMPH. Women may have their ways of communicating, but we have lich-to-lich communication as well. For example, soul torture, soul-searching magic, and psychological attacks. Note: 1. Golden is a WoW, Hearthstone reference. Chapter 270, Undead Plains. 0 from the Ice Plane also came as well. Oh my, such a grand gathering. An allied army from all the Undead Plains, and the Undead Emperors are personally leading? Corpse, ice, desecration, blood, and darkness were 5 of the 6 major undead planes already known to have designs on the mortal plane. Rex's superior, or I should say his superior's superior's superior, was the Ice Plane's undead emperor, Zero. The undead Emperor Zero's true name had long been forgotten by the sands of time. He was a semi-god level Lich who gained fame approximately 1,500 years ago. Nothing was known about him before this, and it didn't seem like he was actually from the Ice Plane. He possessed a vast amount of combat experience and counted as a newcomer among all the undead emperors. No wonder this little Lich Rex was a user of ice magic in addition to death magic. It was said that the average temperature in the Ice Plane was minus 20 degrees Celsius. No normal life forms would be able to survive in such a place. Naturally, the main type of magic there would be ice magic. While the common points of all the undead planes were that there would be plenty of undead, the ways that undead were created in each plane were numerous and wondrous. Each plane also had its own natural laws. Some were more natural dimensions but happened to be particularly suitable for undead to live in, such as the ice and darkness planes. Nothing would be able to survive in the ice plane apart from the undead, while the darkness plane possessed the power to twist life and death, allowing the undead to reproduce just as if they were living. And since there were natural undead planes, there would also be unnatural ones. For example, the master of the desecration plane, Undead Emperor Aso, had expanded his own divine kingdom into an entire undead plane. Yes, a divine kingdom. Although Aso wasn't a true god, he was an ancient and powerful entity that even a true god may not be able to defeat. After all, this generation's true gods still had to be respectful to their elders. Perhaps Aso wasn't a true god, but he was definitely far more powerful than most true gods. Those that surpassed the 3 heavy doors of the myth rank but didn't become a god would become semi-gods. However, there were plenty of ancient powerful individuals in the past that reached the standard for becoming a god but had no intentions of doing so. While divine obligations and godhood represented glory and strength, they also represented responsibilities and constraints. At the same time as being able to obtain concepts powerful enough to affect the world, an individual's personality and soul would be partially taken over by the concept and be transformed into part of the concept. The best example would probably be the unlucky god of holy light. Every semi-god's accomplishments could be described only in epics and legends. For those powerful enough to reach this rank, how could they possibly be swayed so easily by the promise of unreliable power? Some semi-gods even believed that ascending to godhood was only a type of trickery, a compromise with the world. They believed that the power that they could obtain with their own hands wouldn't be any lesser than that gained from ascending to become a true god. The capacity of any plane had to do with the elemental tide. Even a true god's incarnation in the mortal plane would only be able to maintain a semi-god's power level at best. Challenging the limits of a plane's capacity to bear one's power level meant that the entire plane's will would attack you. For the mortal plane, that would be the goddess of order and the goddess of chaos's wills. Even if they didn't personally attack, the huge tide of the mortal planes wouldn't let any challengers go. It would be as if the entire world loathed your very being. For example, there would be endless catastrophes, like accidentally stepping on banana peels all the time, having the worst luck in everything, and countless calamities, both natural and man-made, such as an endless number of enemies arriving at your doorstep. Who knew what the final result would be? Most likely the challenger would have to find a new home just to get some peace and quiet. And due to Aegir's existence, the position of the death god had long been filled. Unless a new concept was born, it would be difficult to even ascend to godhood these days. However, becoming a follower god was quite easy. All one had to do was do one's best to suck up to a true god. But how could the undead emperors that had experienced so much hardship be willing to serve someone else? Most of them were semi-gods who didn't end up dying but were unable to stay any longer in the mortal plane for various reasons, so they ended up hiding out in different dimensions to avoid trouble. As for the residents of the undead planes, how they came to be was even stranger. While some of them were directly created by the undead emperors, and others were undead mages that voluntarily chose to go to different planes due to being unable to stay in the mortal plane, the most numerous of all were, of course, the native residents of the undead planes. The natural laws of the undead planes were, of course, tilted in favor towards the undead, similar to the natural laws of the elemental planes, which favored the elemental creatures. The undead planes were able to naturally produce new undead, but the source of souls for these undead had always been a mystery. One rumor I had heard was that the undead emperors were secretly stealing souls from the river Styx, but I was unsure as to the veracity of this rumor. Of course, if this was true, Aur would be held responsible as he was the one who oversaw the river Styx. At the very least, he would be charged with negligence. With the increase in the elemental tide, the undead emperors would soon have sufficient power to return to their original home, the mortal plane. Yet it must be said that these long-lived existences had since expected the arrival of another holy war and had been preparing for centuries. At the very least, the things involving a certain Orlos had been prepared by them even before he ascended to the throne as the Bardi Emperor. The undead emperors had the advantages of time and location, especially with their proactiveness. They also had quite a decent amount of unity within their own ranks. There were a countless number of undead planes already known to exist. After all, from the day that undead came into existence, they kept accumulating endlessly as they were difficult to destroy. Nor was the mortal plane the only plane that was capable of producing undead emperors. And undead emperors could be produced from more than just undead mages. Perhaps some mighty myth-ranked hero or dragon had given themselves over to serve death, becoming part of the undead. This was despite the fact that the undead had a pitiful growth to reach top-level power ranks. After all, the three heavy doors of myth involved one's physical body and soul, limiting the power level of countless ancient undead. Some even considered it an insurmountable obstacle for the undead. However, the existences capable of becoming undead emperors were far beyond what common sense could measure. Even if normal undead wouldn't be able to grow past myth rank, that didn't mean that the undead emperors were unable to improve their power levels. They had thousands, or even tens of thousands of years to form their strongest foundational accumulation of all. Nobody knew just what they specialized in, and it would be impossible to know it without fighting them. Even when I was at my strongest, I wouldn't have had any guarantee of being able to defeat any undead emperor in single combat. Of course, except for a very few exceptions, there was also no guarantee that I would lose. Luckily for me, not every undead emperor was interested in this holy war, which would happen once every 2,000 or 3,000 years. After all, it would take a lot of effort to connect their plane to the mortal plane. Based on the current situation, the only undead emperors that had interest in the mortal plane were the newcomers to the ranks of undead emperors. There were a total of 6 undead planes and 8 undead emperors at the semi-god level that had taken action, proving their interest in the mortal plane. This was the information that my dog obtained for me as my spy. Another lucky thing was that none of the 8 undead emperors with designs on the mortal plane were existences with power levels that would cause me to despair. At the very least, I knew that in a certain undead plane, there was an ancient existence on par with Aur. In front of the most ancient bone dragon of all named Gregory, everything would meet its end. In each undead plane, an undead emperor would basically be an unstoppable existence. They wouldn't be called emperors, otherwise, and as the only recent newcomer in the past few centuries as well as the winner of the Best Newcomer Award due to beating up the Holy Church in a direct confrontation, Yang Ai's name had already spread far and wide in the undead planes. Due to my fame, I only had to mention that I was Roland, the Undying One. I didn't even have to torture Rex's soul or anything. This Lich, who was so adamant in saying he would never surrender and even kept threatening me, caved in immediately. Not only did he obediently tell me everything I asked him, he even gave me all the information that he had secretly gathered over the years as well as his own inferences. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry as I looked at this skeletal lich head whose teeth kept clattering in fear. Was the undying Roland that scary to him? Just hearing my name would cause undead to tremble in fear? I really am a good person. That's why this little lich who was so scared of me definitely wasn't frightened because of my bad reputation. Yep, it must have been that the other undead emperors were too cruel, which gave me a bad reputation by association. DSK, so soft. Looks like this golden's head won't be able to become a god equipment. Oh, whoops, I should say Rex's head, right? What? Wrong again? Fine, fine, how about Daniel Wu's head? Yep, like I said, my memory is excellent. I'd never remember wrongly. 1. And this Daniel Wu Lich wasn't quite old. Rex was only just a bit over a century, old and had become a Lich only due to his accumulated achievements, which had allowed him to receive his superior's assistance in helping him transform into a Lich. His power level was a bit weaker than real Liches, and he wasn't very popular with his peers. The rumors I heard told me that he was actually recognized as the most handsome Lich in the Ice Plane, which made him super popular with female undead but made all his peers incredibly jealous. This was also why he had been sent here on such a job, which was clearly a waste of time. Since he hadn't expected to be sent on this task at all, he didn't prepare beforehand, and he didn't know much about the mortal plane. He had only arrived for a short time, but just the amount of information that he knew and told me was astonishing enough already. The Desecration Plane's undead emperor also had personally arrived on the mortal plane. He had obviously sealed himself and paid a heavy price in order to remain in the mortal plane. He wouldn't be able to fight at his real undead emperor level of strength, but Hasso was still the highest authority here. That meant that the high-level undead would be organized and act with well-planned goals in mind. Nor would any internal struggles between them be possible. Since we were their enemies, this was doubtlessly a piece of bad news for us. This was all the more so because we were still roaming around in the gigantic Bardi Empire. If we were exposed, and also wanted to come have a chat with me as his junior, that would be truly troublesome. We absolutely can't face him directly or act ridiculously right now. It looks like my choice was the right one. Note, 1, ed/n, for those of you who don't know, quoting from Wikipedia, Daniel Wu Yin-cho is an American actor, director and producer, and as of 2015, starring as Sunny in the AMC martial arts drama series Into the Badlands. He's also considered super handsome. Meanwhile, Rex is mentioned as a handsome and popular Lich.